Come on, Annie. Let's go to the movies.
This is the Cinereelists, episode 651. My name is Kyle.
My name is James.
And my name is Zach.
We're here to talk movies, movie lists, and movie obsession for the next hour or so. All right, how you guys doing in Florida?
Good.
Good. You mean after the hurricane?
Yeah, after the hurricane, yes. I was hoping you guys would understand what I was asking there.
I did.
Okay, thank you, Zach. Zach, how are you doing after the hurricane?
We are doing great. Being located in the center of Florida is really good most of the time for hurricanes because it just loses a lot of power by the time it comes to us. And this one didn't even leave the Gulf by the time it passed us. However, people close to me who did live on the coast experienced quite a bit of flooding, kind of a devastating amount of flooding.
Yeah, you know people in Tampa, right?
Correct.
Okay. Ouch.
Yeah, there is pretty bad.
That's not good. I'm sorry to hear that. James, you're on the second floor of your condo or first floor?
Second floor.
Oh, so you're fine then.
Sure. I mean, I'm also the president of the homeowners association. So if it floods the bottom, it's my problem too, in a way.
I mean, just from like a legal insurance standpoint, don't you also have first use of the life raft as president?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
It's my choice. Women and children first or me first.
Or James first.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would never be like financially hit or anything like that. It would just be a giant hassle if the bottom floors got, flooded out.
Yeah, I can understand if a whole bunch of first floor homes are flooded out, how much of a headache that would be for you.
I know. That's why I'm really hoping it doesn't happen, because
okay.
That would be the worst part of all of that, would be how much of a hassle it would be for me. For sure.
I don't know, guys. I'm thinking as climate change ramps up, Midwest might be the way to go.
I don't think so. No, thank you.
I think the Midwest is the way
coughing.
to go just in general.
In general.
I like the Midwest.
Yeah. Not so bad out here.
It's an underrated region of the country.
I mean, if you want to dodge like all weather, you would just go to like Utah, right?
They have weather in Utah.
Not like extreme weather like we do.
I'm pretty sure they're gonna get droughts and things like that. So
Yeah.
they don't have a huge access to water. Their lake is made of salt.
Yeah. Because you hear so much about the people of Utah dying of thirst.
Well, no one's in America is dying of thirst yet, but with the way things are going. Anyway, this is getting much more political than I anticipated. Speaking of the Midwest, though, I did get to enjoy the third largest city of our country this past weekend.
Chicago?
Yes, Chicago. That's right.
I knew that right
I
off
was
the
like
dome.
New York, LA, then Chicago. Okay.
Chicago, yeah, right. The Midwest one, yeah.
What's the fourth?
Probably Houston
Not
is
Miami?
my guess. I don't think Miami's as big as you think it is compared to the rest of the country.
I don't really think it is at all. That came on into the top of my head and I said it out loud.
Houston.
Yeah, I think Houston's 4. But Dallas, Fort Worth, if you combine those two, that's a pretty large metropolitan area also. Anyway, I was in Chicago this past weekend for a special exhibit at this Science and Industry Museum all about the science of James Bond.
Wait, you went there just for that?
Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah, it's fun.
I didn't know you were that big a fan.
I like how movies are made.
Okay.
And we thought it'd be a fun thing to take our son to.
Sure.
And Chicago's only like 2.5 hours away from where I live. So it's not like it's a hard drive or anything. Found an Airbnb, stayed there for a couple of nights. Got to spend a day at the museum, which is a lot of fun.
Nice. Was there anything you saw at the exhibit that like impressed you or surprised you?
So do you remember in Casino Royale, there is a moment where Daniel Craig or James Bond is driving the Aston Martin and then he flips it and he rolls it like 7 times. And at the time that was the world record for like most complete rolls of a car in a stunt.
Okay.
So they had the actual car there, like all smashed up. So that was really cool to see that car. And then they had a whole little making of about how they figured that stunt out. how they didn't really know how many, like you don't go out to set that record and be like, yeah, we're going to roll the car 7 times. Like you just said, we're going to roll this car at a high speed and see what happens.
Mhm.
And it was just really interesting to like just to see the amount of thought that goes into a stunt. Something that happens on screen for 5 seconds takes months of planning. And then they got the actual car and it was a different center of gravity than expected. So they had to like redo the entire stunt on the fly.
So the car they flipped was an actual Aston Martin, or was it like a car that looked like an Aston Martin?
It was an actual Aston Martin.
Wow, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Because aren't those like $100,000 easy?
Sure. They didn't talk about the production budget of the stunt.
I'm pretty sure they are.
But I mean, also that's like a classic Bond brand right there. So I can imagine Aston Martin's like, yeah, you can flip our car.
Yeah, it was donated.
Yes. Yeah. They probably didn't pay for it.
Plus, like, think about it. The difference between that and just using a cheaper car, what, like a $40,000 car, is they've saved $60,000 on the biggest stunt, you know, in that reel of the movie. That's a drop in the bucket.
I'm just saying, if you were going to do it potentially more than once, you would just take another car's base and put something that looks like the car on the top of it and flip it.
I think in this case, their plan was, we're doing this once, and whatever we catch on film, that's the stunt. And it happens that it rolled 7 times, it landed wheels up, and like, thank goodness, that's how the car landed. So,
nice. And then they preserved the wrecked car, and it ended up in a museum in Chicago.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's pretty wild. The
other cool thing that I learned is the James Bond franchise. It didn't invent the jet ski. But it came up with the concept for what came to jet ski. In one of the early Bond movies, I can't remember which one, they had what essentially was called a water bike. And it's like James Bond's riding, like, it looks like a motorcycle across the water, but it's got, paddles and everything. And that was the first time someone thought of like, oh, maybe we could do a jet ski. And then the jet ski was born off that idea. So I did not know that James Bond invented the jet ski.
Interesting.
That's fantastic. Do you know about the broccoli connection with James Bond?
You mean Barbara Broccoli?
Yeah.
I mean, she's like the head producer. Doesn't she own the rights or something?
Yep. She owns the rights to the Bond films. The Broccoli family does.
Yep.
And do you know what the Broccoli family claims?
No.
They claim that the vegetable broccoli is named after their family.
Really?
Not that they're named after the vegetable, but the vegetable is named after them.
Do they have any proof of this, or is this 100% a claim?
Proof? No.
Okay.
It's one of like 3 claims for the origin of the name of broccoli. And it's not completely spurious. Like, it's possible that they're correct about this. And it's also possible that they're wrong. I just think it's hilarious because broccoli and really like a ton of vegetables all come from the same plant, right? They've all been horticultured out of the same plant, like cabbage and broccoli and lettuce, and they're all the same plant. Brussels sprouts, they're all from the same thing, and they've been like cultured out. And the broccoli family claim that they invented broccoli.
I don't know if I believe that.
Yeah, it might not be true, but it might be true.
Well,
wait, what part's not true? That they're actually named after broccoli, or that they claim to be named after broccoli? Like,
no, they definitely claim it for sure.
All right.
It might not be true.
Gotcha.
Anyway, I find that a fun fact.
What a fun fact. Amazing. I'm impressed. Anything else at the 007 museum?
I mean, yeah, they had, I would say those are probably the 2 coolest things, but they had like some of the cars from the different movies and some of the suits and like, things you expect to see in like a movie museum exhibit.
Nice. I wish we got more of that type of stuff in Orlando, but we don't.
I mean, this is a traveling exhibit, so it may come to a city near you.
Yeah, we don't get it in Orlando.
Do you not have museums in Orlando or Florida at all?
We do, just not good ones.
Oh.
Ooh. Titanic experience hate coming from James.
That's a that's not a museum. It's more of like a tourist attraction, right?
With actual artifacts from the HMS Titanic.
Sure. Yeah, and you can go next to the Ripley's Believe It or Not right next door and find
Right.
actual artifacts as well.
So
Yeah.
it's that's not like a public museum with a Titanic exhibit. This is like a more of a
It's
not
a tourist
thrill ride.
attraction.
It's a tourist attraction.
It's a
Okay.
tourist attraction. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not what you would consider a museum.
It's an
don't think.
experience. What is the difference between a building full of information and artifacts about an historical event that you pay to go into and a
Mhm.
museum? What is the difference?
I would say museums have a mission of education first, profit second, where the Titanic experience would flip that, where their mission is number one, money, number two, education. So I just think that's the difference between museum and other things.
Does this have to be a stated priority list or like just an implied priority list?
I mean, I don't know if I'm sure there's a mission statement for Titanic experience. I doubt if it says priority one, make money. Priority two, educate the public.
That's what I'm
So,
saying. So is it just
I would say this is more of an implied priority list than a stated priority list.
So it's just kind of like a subjective from the outside. It feels more like they want the money than the education.
I mean, obviously museums charge money. They need to be sustainable. And I've been to this museum in Chicago, the science industry, multiple times, and definitely it was more nickel and dimey this time around. Like, do you remember the coal mine? Have you been to this one before, Zach?
Yes.
Yeah. So you remember the coal mine ride, right? Where you
Yeah.
ride the elevator down?
Yeah.
Pretty sure that was included in the past.
Oh, and now it's not?
Now it's like an extra ticket.
That place used to be a museum. I'm very disappointed.
And yeah, no, well, I mean, so obviously museums are struggling financially and they're skirting the line of like education versus money. So I'm not saying that, I walked into this museum, it was all free and they said, just enjoy yourself and learn anything you want. Like they were charging me for things. However, I don't know what my point is anymore.
I can't disagree with that.
I still think the Museum of Science industry, their first mission is to educate.
Gotcha.
Whereas the Titanic experience is like, well, we want to make money. Oh, hey, we got some Titanic artifacts. Let's throw some Instagram things up and good to go.
Zach, remember when we went to that museum in Cuba? Did we pay to go there?
Well, I hope
Well,
not.
It's a communist country.
Yeah, exactly. I doubt you paid to get into it. I can answer that question.
I couldn't remember. I mean,
No, you did not pay,
Some
James.
places still charge. I mean, if so, that museum could have very easily charged. I mean, it was
Sure.
basically for tourists, that museum.
Yes, because Cuba and its huge tourism industry.
I will say Google says this museum is dedicated to the Titanic, offering artifacts, recreations, and guided tours.
Wait, is this like Google AI or
Yeah, this
the
is the-
mission?
Well, this is the Google info dump on the right side.
Okay,
Sure.
and they call it a museum.
I mean,
Do they call it like a capital M museum or a lowercase m museum?
Lowercase m.
Okay.
they can be a museum, but also more of a tourist attraction than a museum.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. I think a good museum is a tourist attraction.
Not always.
Usually, I mean, if it's a good museum,
Yeah, maybe.
like the Louvre,
I think a good museum can attract tourists, but I think a museum and a tourist attraction are two different things.
that is splitting hairs in a way that is unhelpful to anything.
Look, I want to be an information gatekeeper, okay? And I want my Titanic experience at my museum to be better than your Orlando. Let's get all the Disney tourist Titanic experience. All right, just give me this win.
That's awesome. Also, I should disclose that I have a financial relationship with the Titanic experience.
Right.
All right, moving on.
I've never
Moving
been
on.
there. I probably need to go there before I talk trash about it. But anytime I see it advertised, it's alongside all of the other tourist attractions. That's why I consider it that world. Whereas like the Orlando Museum of History or whatever it's called that we have in downtown never gets advertised anywhere. You wouldn't even know it exists unless you looked up museum on Google in Orlando.
That's true.
Okay, I have one last point to make, and then we
Yep.
can move on from this museum talk.
Mm-hmm.
So last year, Megan and I and Galen went to Chicago because she wanted to go to the Museum of Ice Cream.
Mhm.
Okay. And we know beforehand getting into this that this was not a educational museum. This was an Instagram museum where it's all going to be like prints and large things. And like they even said, come to the Museum of Ice Cream and use this hashtag and show everyone what you're doing. And you get there and there's like 6 rooms or 8 rooms. And it's all, you know, things to take pictures in front of. And each room has like 2 sentences on ice cream.
Mhm.
So yes, did this call this place a museum? Uh-huh. Did I learn anything at all about ice cream or the history? Not whatsoever.
Yeah.
This was definitely a tourist attraction disguising itself as a museum. It was fun. I'm not saying it was a bad experience. It was not a museum experience.
This looks cool. I'm looking at it right now. Was there a sprinkle ball pit?
Yeah, we have photos in the sprinkle ball pit, and we have photos with the banana phones hanging from the ceiling.
Where are
And,
all these photos? I've never seen these photos.
Yeah, you haven't shared any of these photos with me.
Yeah, you didn't
They're on
even
my
do what they wanted you to do. Put them on your Instagram.
They're on my Instagram. If you guys don't check my Instagram, that's your issue, not
They're
mine.
not on your Instagram.
You're right. It's a big issue that I don't check. your
Oh my
Instagram.
goodness. All right. I'm just going to pull up Instagram right now.
I only said that so that he would do it and I didn't have to.
Yeah.
I must see
then-
a photo of you with a banana phone.
No,
Here,
I have to
there's-
see you.
There's Megan in front of donuts. That's at the museum. There's Galen and Megan on a banana phone right there.
I don't see anyone in a pool
Okay.
full of sprinkles.
I don't. Yes. Well, the sprinkle photos didn't look very good. It just kind of looks. They're not great.
You got into a pool full of sprinkles?
Not real ones. They're plastic sprinkles, like a ball pit.
They're like big sprinkles?
Yeah, like
Okay.
the size of, I don't know, 6 inches long or
I was
something.
gonna say that sounded very unsanitary.
It still does.
It still was unsanitary. Yes.
Although
Those
I'm not taking notes on what's sanitary or not from James.
are-
How often do they wipe down the sprinkles?
Never.
Never.
They never clean the sprinkles.
You cannot clean all those
Gross.
sprinkles.
Probably some little kid peed in there.
Oh, for sure. The ball pit's definitely the grossest part you can go to.
Ugh.
Looks cool though.
Yeah, it was a good time. Anyway.
What's your Instagram handle if the listeners want to go check out your sprinkle photos?
Oh, that does not get shared.
Really?
It's a private Instagram. I guess it's private. People
Is
can
it
try and add me
private?
if they want. Oh yeah, it's in private.
Why? What are you hiding?
Well, no. It used to be a public one,
Okay.
and then when I was a teacher, my students found it, and then I had to go private because then they started like commenting on things and looking at my photos, and it was my personal Instagram account. It was on my teacher account. So
But you're not a teacher anymore. You could make it public.
you know what? I like the anonymity.
All right.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Bam. Sprinkle pit.
I can barely tell.
He is not, for the record, he's not showing us Instagram. He's just showing us his photo
His reels.
Yeah,
No,
on app.
The
On his
ones I
app.
showed you before were Instagram. The sprinkle pit did not make Instagram.
Not
Not
good
every
enough.
picture is Instagram worthy. As a true artiste, I know when to edit and when to present. And maybe you guys could learn a little something from me. I'm not sure.
Oh,
I think
yeah,
we can learn
sure.
a lot from you, Kyle.
Oh yeah, especially about ice cream because I've been to a museum.
You've read the sentences.
I read this. What are we doing this week?
Good question.
What are we doing?
Welcome to episode 651. In this episode 651, we're going to talk Megalopolis, the new film that's in theaters now. And we're also going to run down our top 10 movies that take a big swing. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Ooh, can we
are.
say biggest?
No, we can't.
Okay.
Before we do that, we need to let you know there's a video version of this podcast on YouTube. Go check it out there and watch while you listen. You could also support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Cinereelists. Get extra after show audio, amongst other Cinereal swag. You could leave us an Apple Podcast review, 5 stars only. We'd appreciate that. Or send us a listener email to heyguys@cinereelists.com. That address, as well as links to any of those other things, are in the description of this episode. Send us a comment, a question, a list suggestion, any of those kinds of things, and we will reply to it live on the podcast on a future episode. You guys ready to get into Megalopolis?
Yeah.
Let's do it right after this clip.
Julia. Hi, come in. I had hoped to speak with Mr. Crassus. Oh, I love that sound. Listen, you and I ought to have an understanding. You're on my territory now, and you're gonna play by my rules, okay? 1, Crassus is mine. 2, the bank is mine. And 3, and this may come as a little surprise to you, right? Caesar's mine. And he has been for a long time.
That was Megalopolis, a 2024 American epic science fiction drama, written, directed, and produced by Francis Ford Coppola. This movie stars Adam Driver, Giancarlo Esposito, Natalie Emanuel, Aubrey Plaza, Shia LaBeouf, John Voight, Lawrence Fishburne, Katherine Hunter, and Dustin Hoffman, amongst others. And the official IMDb plot synopsis for Megalopolis is: the city of New Rome is the main conflict between Caesar Catalina, a brilliant artist in favor of a utopian future, and the greedy mayor Franklin Cicero. Between them is Julia Cicero, her loyalty divided between her father and her beloved. Zach and I saw this in IMAX together, which is kind of
fun.
Kind of rare. We don't typically see movies together. The original plan was to see it with listener Logan, but he had to cancel due to the hurricane. So shout out Logan. I'm dying to know what Zach thought about Megalopolis.
Yeah, so did you guys like refrain from talking after this movie?
We didn't really
James
talk about
will
it.
he'll never discuss the movie with me when we see it together.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate. I'm impressed by your ability to like not talk about this movie immediately after seeing it. I wanted to polo Zach after seeing it. I saw it on Thursday, but I didn't want to ruin anything for Zach whatsoever. So I just
sure
had to sit on it.
The only thing that was discussed was during the movie. I did turn to James at one point and say, "Oh, this is a Christmas movie."
Right.
That was the only thing we discussed.
During a montage, there's like 2 frames of Christmas things.
Gee, which montage? There was so many
there
of
was
them.
a lot of them for sure. Who wants to start with Megalopolis? Anybody?
I'd love to hear what Kyle thinks.
All right.
Well, I want to hear what Zach thinks, but I mean, I'll go first. But where to start with this movie? I don't even know where to start with this movie.
How about try to synopsize it better than that
Sure.
IMDb did? Because I don't think IMDb got to the heart of the matter here.
So I think the best way to describe this movie is it's based around it's based around the bones of like a Greek tragedy. That's kind of the feeling I was getting from it, where you have Adam Driver, who's this city architect. He is this genius. He has all these ideas of what the future of civilization should look like. He has very big ideas. And then he's going up against the mayor of New Rome, which at times is just New York City. Like even the license plates on the cars are just like New York license plates. So I was like, is this allegorically New Rome, or are they like this is actually just a city called New Rome? That's Giancarlo Esposito. He's the mayor, and he's definitely trying to fix the problems of now. He's not a very popular mayor, so he's much more focused on the now, where Adam Driver is focused on the future, and they're butting heads on that. Natalie Emanuel plays Giancarlo Esposito's daughter. She's this party girl who gets in the orbit of Adam Driver and starts to kind of become his muse and starts to believe in his vision. At the same time, there is this very rich family. I can't remember what they're called, but that's run by John Voight, is the patriarch of that family.
And Adam Driver is a cousin in that family.
Oh, that's right. Thank you that's a good point. Yes, Adam Driver is the cousin to John Voight. John Voight's this rich banker. He kind of funds everything, including Adam Driver's vision for the city. And is it his son is Shia LaBeouf?
Yes.
Yeah. And Shia is sort of he's in the shadow of Adam Driver and wants to take him down and become the new king of the family.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of inter-family politics happening in this movie, as well as some actual inter-political things happening based around the development of the city. Did I kind of capture it?
I want to add a couple things.
Please, yes.
One that that Shia LaBeouf turns like this populist kind of like political leader in the city in order to
Right, yes.
power. The second thing is Aubrey Plaza plays a character who is the mistress of Adam Driver, but then when he kind of throws her to the side, she pursues power by marrying that richest guy in the city, right?
John Voight.
Yeah, John Voight, who's like, wealth there is like, you know, trillions and trillions of dollars, not billions of dollars. You know, like they're obscenely wealthy. And then she marries him and kind of like tries to orchestrate things through that power.
So I would say on paper, to me, this sounds like an interesting movie. Like if you would describe that to me, I'm like, oh, this kind of sounds like, you know, like, again, a Greek tragedy of all these different families vying for power and vision of what the future should be. In execution, this movie is all over the place. And for me, the moment where I was like really cocking my head really far to the side and wondering like, what am I watching here? Is, I guess you can call it the circus wedding scene. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a very extended scene because a lot of plot happens in that scene. But we're also just getting images of clowns and there's a circus happening and there's a lot of like weird cuts and visual angles being used. And it just really felt like we're just trying to Coppola's trying to, I don't know, sell a vision to me right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a vision that I am not buying whatsoever. And that was the point of this movie where I was like, I don't think I'm enjoying this movie. At first, I was sort of on the fence because I'm going to say, I don't think the acting is very good in this movie. And it's not because of the actors, because there's good actors. Like we read that list of people in the movie. I would say they're all accomplished, talented actors. So I really think it comes down to what was, maybe Shia LaBeouf's not a talented actor, accomplished, but you know, he's an exception. I think this movie comes down to what was Coppola giving to these actors? What direction was he giving them? And I think these actors were doing what Coppola said. And I just do not know what Coppola wanted out of these actors because I found the dialogue to be cheesy. I found their delivery at times to be cheesy. Their accents are even bad. Like Natalie Emmanuel, who's, I believe, British. She's sometimes talking in a flat American accent. Other times she like starts going to like a Brooklyn accent. And it was just kind of back and forth. And I don't know if that's directions from Coppola because I feel like she would be able to stay on top of an accent throughout the movie. So the whole time I'm watching this thing and I'm just thinking, I think this is just an indulgence on Coppola's part of trying to make this big vision movie with a lot of ideas about both the positive future of humanity and the negative future of civilization. And I think everyone in the movie was just saying yes to him the entire time. I can't imagine anyone, being that he is Coppola, being that he's 80 years old, 79 years old or something. I don't think anyone was saying no to him through this entire movie. And I think this movie needed people to start saying no to him because it's a bit of a train wreck. There's a lot of specific things we can get into. I don't know if we want to talk spoilers or not. But I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say about this movie before we get into some of the more specifics.
I don't necessarily think we can spoil this movie.
Agreed.
But there's individual moments I want to talk about, which
that's what I mean. Like, I don't think you could, like, even talking about it would not be the same as experiencing it, for sure. Okay.
It's definitely an experience. Not going to lie about that.
All right. If you get the feeling like something needs to not be talked about specifically, then just say something. But I think for the most part, we're going to talk openly about this.
Yeah. James?
I like this movie. I thought
really.
So I'm not going to stump for it as like the perfectly assembled 2 hours and 17 minutes that I've ever seen in my life, but it's one of the most specifically assembled 2 hours and 17 minutes of my life. I mean, I got a kick out of it. Let's say that. for all of its faults and its interesting elements. Like, if there's one thing you can't accuse this movie of being, it's boring. Like, I was not bored with it at all. I was constantly trying to figure out what the movie's saying and what it just said, and how that relates to this new wacky thing that's happening. And I really enjoyed the ride that the movie took me on. I thought there were cheesy moments in the movie and cheesy writing, and I don't know if that was intentional or not. And I don't really care because I kind of enjoyed it. Like, there were moments that the guy next to me, I don't know if you heard him, Zach, but the guy next to me was having an absolute hoot watching this movie.
Oh, I didn't hear him. I heard the woman next to me having a hoot.
Yeah, I mean, he was laughing through almost the entire thing, and he was making me enjoy it more, basically, because I was like almost getting cues from him that, like, I should not be taking this seriously. You know what I mean? I should be having fun with this because clearly somebody in that theater was having fun with it. So I was like, I'll take a lead from this guy.
I had walkouts in my theater.
I don't think we had any walkouts.
Really?
I mean,
there weren't enough people there to walk out.
There was there was maybe
like
10 people in our theater.
Okay, there were me, 3, 4, 5, 7 to 8 people in my theater.
And how many people walked out?
3.
Okay.
Yeah, a pair and then a single guy later. So I would say a third of my theater walked out of this movie.
Sure. I mean, the attendance and the fact that it was opening night IMAX did not bode well for the movie, I would say. Like a 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock movie IMAX opening night, you should not have 10 people at most in your theater, for sure. But setting that aside, I was entertained by what was going on, and intrigued enough that I want to see it again and see if there's more to this than just being entertained on a one pass thing, or is there more to this that somebody could sink their teeth into. Also, I like a lot of messy movies. Like, it's not often that I think I get turned off if somebody is clearly going for something, even if they like don't get there. Just the act of somebody bucking the system and trying in a big way, I really like that. And I probably will give those types of movies more rope, more room, more leniency on like how tight the story is, or how many holes, or how many like untied threads a movie will leave. And this movie leaves a lot of them, for sure. And I think this fits that bill for sure. So
I knew James,
overall I liked it.
I knew you would like this movie because you like Southland Tales, and this is cut from the same cloth.
Coppola's Southland Tales.
Yeah,
for sure. What'd you think, Zach?
So I have complicated opinions about this movie. I think this is a bad movie that's poorly made, and I did enjoy myself and I liked the movie.
Okay.
Sure.
But I think maybe unquestionably it's a bad, failed kind of project. A lot of the enjoyment was probably not intended, in the sense of like, it was really funny, but I don't think he meant it to be funny in the places that it was the funniest. But I had a good time with it. Very similar to James, I have a lot of respect for someone that will shoot for the moon or try for something. You know, when we were making our list of movies that take a big swing, I was just looking at movie after movie that are just conventional, right? Like, this movie took no swings whatsoever. It told a story, you know, in the mold of every other movie tells a story. And then every now and then someone decides, I'm going to tell a story in a way that people do not tell stories, and let's see if it works. And it's like throwing spaghetti at a wall, basically. And you're either it works or it doesn't. This one is, I honestly, a debacle. It's a waste of $130 million of his money. I mean, it's just
a waste
crazy.
of his fortune. Yeah.
But good on him. And I am glad I saw it and I enjoyed myself. And we can talk specifics. I mean, the movie is very uneven, right?
Mhm.
So like there's parts that are very serious and dramatic, and other parts are just goofy. Some of the acting I thought was really good. I did like Adam Driver's performance overall. I thought he had a lot of gravitas that was appropriate for the role. Other acting, it was maybe the worst performance I've ever seen Aubrey Plaza give. I thought she was terrible in this movie. And maybe it was just a tone thing, because tonally she just didn't fit with the rest of the movie in the way that she was playing it. But she had like a femme fatale character. But she was playing it as if it was a high school play.
She was playing it ironically is the best way to put it, where it's like she knew she was in a movie and that she was playing a big character.
Right.
And it didn't work. But her character's name is Wow Platinum.
Which is fine.
But I think it gives you kind of idea of like the kind of character she was maybe trying. Like she was trying to embody what does a Wow Platinum act like.
Yeah, and when she's on camera, I get that persona. But when she's just having like private dialogue with Adam Driver, I didn't feel the chemistry, I would say.
Or her scene where she seduces Shia LaBeouf.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
That was
scene.
a lot. Yeah,
that was unfortunate. That was an unfortunate scene. But I will say this movie had a Robin Hood reference, so that's instantly going to bump it up for me. James, I was very happy when that happened. And a little foreshadowing to 20 seconds later when it paid off. So,
well, he had the Robin Hood costume earlier in the movie.
Yeah,
and then they brought it back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, since we're not going to spoil things, John Voight shooting that arrow is my favorite part of that movie.
Oh yeah,
because it's supposed to be like this big threatening moment, and he takes a good like 10 seconds to like get the arrow notched and pull it back. And like, I know it's a dramatic moment in this movie, but like if this was quote unquote real life, you could just walk out of that room while he's fumbling with that arrow.
Oh no,
I mean it's
felt
fantastic.
Yeah, I felt like there was, I felt clearly Coppola knew what he was doing at times in this movie. I think other times it's just like he reads it differently probably than most audience members would read things. But there were other moments like that arrow moment where he'd have to be delusional not to know that it's a little silly.
Oh yeah.
Like I think he was playing for laughs at that moment. And
I think a little bit less than playing for laughs.
I don't think he's doing it comedically. I think to him it was a serious moment. And like he just knew John Voight's going to take 10 seconds to notch an arrow. So
I think it was a dramatic point, not a slapstick point.
Yeah.
You think Shia LaBeouf's character getting hit in the butt twice with arrows shortly after that was not played for laughs? That whole scene was played for laughs. Plus John Voight talking about, his issue in the bed and stuff like that. Like the whole scene was played for laughs.
I understand what you're saying. I think he tried to do two things at once, which could be said for a lot of this movie. But like, I think it was a dramatic scene where he also included humor. I don't think it was meant to be his Ace Ventura scene. You know what I mean? I think it was both at once rather than it was just a comedic scene that he knew was going to be goofy. It was like he was trying to attain fun along with a climactic dramatic moment.
Maybe if he did, then he clearly missed one and he nailed the other, which I'm fine with.
I found Adam Driver's character, the lead character, to be visionless, where he talked a lot about like we need to have a conversation about the future and we need to make sure the future is safe for our children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at no point in my experience of the movie did I know what his vision of the future was besides movable sidewalks.
Well, that was a big part of it.
But yeah, the sidewalks. Yeah. But like he didn't seem like I felt like he was supposed to be this visionary, and I don't know what his vision was.
Well, his philosophy was very much that utopia is about asking questions, not about giving answers.
But then he just creates utopia. He never asked anyone what utopia is.
Right.
Yeah, so I understand like that. Like he's like, yeah, let's talk about it. But then at the end, he's like, well, here it is. I made it.
And
No
I would
input.
not want to live in that city.
No, it looked awful.
It looked terrible to
garish.
me.
Yeah. Overall for me, I found the CG to be quite bad in this movie, and the green screen and the mats. Like there's a moment where he and Natalie Manuel are like standing on beams up in the air, and
I
that
thought
looked
good.
Oh, it looked terrible. It looked so flat.
I was like clenching my chair.
No.
Because yeah.
Like, you really thought they're gonna fall?
No, I mean clearly it was computer generated, and they didn't have actors hanging off of steel beams and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there was a moment there where my fear of heights kicked in a little bit, and I was like, he's gonna drop her. You know what I mean? That's gonna be the end of that.
Oh, okay. So you were afraid for the character.
Oh, okay. I thought you were afraid of the set.
Specifically that set, I have never been less convinced that someone was high up in the air than in that set.
Right. Like you could just tell that there was mattresses 3 inches below them.
It almost looked like a dream sequence, for how fake it was.
Yeah.
I was convinced enough that I was worried for the character.
Well, that's good. Have we talked at all about his power or his invention?
No,
because that was super interesting. Like, and the fact that he worked for the design authority, like I was getting some real like sci-fi vibes from this. Nowhere does it go at all.
Zach, why don't you describe his power?
Yes.
Okay, so this is actually the first thing that we're presented with in the movie. So the very first thing that we learn is that he has the ability to stop time. We don't know where this ability came from or what basically powers it. And also, we don't really know how he uses it.
Or why he uses it.
I mean, we don't get the sense that he uses it for any practical purpose. He more just kind of like checks in now and then that he can still do it. But he can stop time. And for everyone except a few people, that maybe he has a special connection with, even if it's before he has a connection with them. And then the other thing is he won the Nobel Prize for his invention called Megalon, which is a futuristic building material. And we know almost nothing about this material except that it can do anything and everything. It's a magical material that can fuse with the human body and change shape and float and just really do anything.
It's unobtainium.
Yeah.
Right. So the big question, I think, after having seen the rest of the movie is, was that supposed to be taken literal? The Megalon stuff, I think, was, but the idea that he could stop time.
Yes.
You do. You think this was a world where a guy could stop time?
Yeah, because another person observed it.
Sure. But also that person was fantastical in the same way, I would say. She was like she was in this story literally to be fodder for him. Like she's the person that gets fought over. She doesn't really have much of a character to herself.
So I would say the purpose of him being able to stop time is to speak to his character feeling like he's a control freak, right? So being able to feel like he needs and can control everything around him, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wants to shape the future, make utopia, be in control, tell the mayor what's what, all those kind of things. So it's a control thing, right? That's what it stands for.
Mm-hmm.
But this is also a movie where he makes Megalon. So if he can make Megalon, I think that he can stop time.
And do you think he can stop time because he's just so brilliant that he's figured out how to do this, or because he has some special power, some origin story that we're just not seeing on the screen?
I think it's a reflection of his genius.
Yes.
Okay.
Right, because for a while he does lose the power when he's at his low point. And then Natalie Emanuel, his muse, is able to she then can use the power next, right? He almost passes it to her, or they become shared.
Shared, yeah.
Yeah, maybe shared's a better word. Yeah, so there's the first meeting between Adam Driver and Natalie Emmanuel, like she first observes him use the power.
Mhm.
It's time stops, but she's aware that it time stops. And then she goes up to his office and they have this whole conversation. And it really is like a back and forth philosophy of the future and, you know, her role as the mayor's daughter and so and so. And they come to a disagreement. They're not on the same page. And as she's walking out, and he makes a time joke, and she says, "Oh yes, I see you have lots of time on your hands." And then he's like, "Oh, what, you know about this?" And then that's what starts their whole relationship. I'm like, why don't you just lead with, "I saw your froze time"? Like, why do you wait for a little passing joke as you're leaving? Now, again, I get this is a clever Coppola writing thing, but again, it's, for me, it just felt like a little too much.
Oh, I think that was a smart play. You don't play your only hidden card right away. You first see if you can get the internship without playing your card, and if you can't, you play the card.
And you hope that they make a time joke, so then you could retort with your own witty.
She would have said anything he said. She would have turned it into a time joke.
Okay. So again, as we start talking about this, I thought it was an interesting concept. This guy can stop time. He's working for this mysterious design authority, and like, what is he doing to the city? And it doesn't seem to really matter. It's not. That's not where the movie wants to take us, and it's not like a mystery of who is this guy and what is this organization he's running. Movies doesn't care about that, and I kind of wish the movie cared more about who he is, and not like what Coppola's fears and visions are for the future of humanity.
Why didn't the movie make us question him more if he's a good guy or a bad guy? Like,
because he seems to have like unlimited power and unlimited resources.
Yeah, but the movie's always very kind of fawning over him.
Mm-hmm.
Like it brings up the fact that, oh, he murdered his wife, possibly, but the movie never really makes us think that he should have been convicted of that. It always makes us think that he was wrongly accused, right? We never wonder if he actually did it. Why didn't the movie make us wonder maybe he shouldn't have all this power?
Because it's not a good movie. That's why. Like it's poorly written. Is that maybe a reason?
I mean,
it's hard to ask why movies don't do things, because it's, you know, we didn't make them. So
I mean, I would guess the reason why we didn't go down that road is because maybe Coppola considers himself that character.
Sure.
On some level, that he sees himself in that character. So even though people might say things about them or assume things about them, it's not necessarily true in his vision of that character. On top of that, I think I think sometimes visionaries, even if they're not necessarily good people, because they might not have said definitively whether he murdered his wife, but he's definitely like a guy who sleeps around and like
he's a philanderer,
right?
Yeah.
Doesn't treat people real nice and stuff like that. Like the movie doesn't let him off the hook on that type of stuff. But I think there's a lot being said in clunky ways, but a lot being said for like two visions here, right? You've got the politician who wants to stay in power and is trying to solve real world today problems in like a kind of a responsible manner. And then you've got this other person with somewhat unlimited resources trying to bulldoze the poor in an effort for a brighter future down the way. You know what I mean? Doesn't have much thought for like people in the now, more thought for like what the future could be, essentially. And so I think Coppola gave space for both of those, but definitely favored the visionary over the person who's trying to make the here and now better. And I thought that was just interesting from like a 80-year-old filmmaker perspective, especially a guy who was once kind of vaunted and beloved, still is on some level, but has decades of distance between what most people would consider his best movies and today.
Oh yeah.
And I think he's a dude who's been told a no a lot. And I think with this movie specifically, he decided he doesn't care anymore. When you're that old and probably that rich. From what I understand, he sold part of his vineyard.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also his vineyard is nowhere near where most of his money comes from. Evidently, he owns tons of property, like all over the globe.
Oh, I thought he made more money on Vineyard than he did making movies, which maybe that's true also. But
Right. Like movies is like the very bottom of the barrel as far as what he's made money on.
Right.
And then you got the Vineyard, and then you got all these other things that nobody ever talks about that Coppola's been
interesting.
involved in. And that's part of the reason why he just hasn't made a lot of movies.
I've been to
often.
that vineyard and it's very nice.
Nice. And he didn't sell the whole thing either. He sold
No.
like part of it. So if you can sell part of your vineyard and finance $120 million movie, I think I'm not saying it wasn't a sacrifice. It's not like the guy sold his last, plot of land at the vineyard in order to finance this.
He's not Kevin
totally.
Smith putting all his money into making a movie.
Right. And he's in recent interviews, he's said that he's going to do one small film and then finance another big film before he dies. He's like, that's his plan.
Nice.
Before he dies,
I mean,
he's going to make
Honestly,
two more.
if I were a billionaire, I would certainly consider like hiring my favorite writer and my favorite director and my favorite cinematographer and say, you guys make a movie.
Sure.
Such
know?
a vanity project.
You wouldn't
Yeah.
want any say in that movie?
No. What would I would only take away from it.
Yeah,
Do you know
see,
what I mean?
you say that now as the common man, but once you become a billionaire, all of a sudden your ideas are
Right.
way better than their ideas.
It's possible, but it just like I like the idea of being a patron of the arts. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like you just do something amazing, and I'll help you do it. You know?
And
Which is how
what if they made this and they're like, here's your something amazing? Would you be
Well,
happy with this if you funded it?
What I mean, no, no. Again, I'm happy that this movie exists. I am happy it exists.
Sure. But
And,
you're also happy you didn't spend $120 million on it.
Well, sure, and I think I don't know if Francis Ford Coppola today, post Jack, is like the person that I would have picked to throw money at. But yeah,
you'd be given to like Ryan Johnson.
yeah, for sure.
I do find it interesting that this movie had like a sci-fi edge. Has he
Yeah.
directed anything that's like even remotely sci-fi?
I mean, he did Dracula. I mean, that's if you consider fantasy,
It's a
horror,
horror movie.
sci-fi. Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, I can't think off the top of my head of a sci-fi movie. I do think this is a movie that actually would have benefited from being longer.
I just remembered Adam Driver, the face he made when he had his face repaired and he's wearing the hood.
Oh yeah,
And the faces he made were hilarious.
like when he was screaming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how much were you hoping for the rest of the movie he'd have some cool half gold face?
It didn't cross my mind.
It didn't cross. my mind either.
I really wanted him to be like this disfigured artist. Like his invention saved him, but now he is physically changed. Like, and no, he just looks like Adam Driver in the next scene. I'm like, okay, well, that was a missed opportunity right there. So,
You said this was like a Greek tragedy.
Yeah.
The ending is certainly not a Greek tragedy. That was so subversive to have it just be a happy ending to where everything works out.
Well, and that's why I wish this movie was longer, because at some point you really feel like it's coming to a head between Adam Driver and the mayor. And the mayor's even like making deals with Adam Driver over his daughter. You're like, oh, there's blackmail going on, and there's insurances being passed around. Like, oh, this is really getting to something. And then it just ends and everyone's getting along. And I was like, oh man, we're building to something interesting here. And nope, we get a baby at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I could say the setup is very Greek tragedy, but the ending, not whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like at the beginning of the movie, like the first half of it leaned into that a lot. The idea of like New Rome, New York, like the costuming were kind of like half modern suits and half Roman, whatever you call them.
Like Roman guards and like the
Right.
epaulets, and yes.
Exactly. There was like visually and just the dialogue itself like the whole scene on the scaffolding over the model and stuff like that. Like they were like directly quoting Shakespeare, if I'm not wrong.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
for sure.
Lawrence Fishburne was quoting like saying Greek quotes throughout the movie.
But I felt like as the movie went on, there was less and less of that, but more like I also got like a very like an old Hollywood vibe, like a lot of the costuming specifically
Totally.
of
Aubrey Plaza.
of Aubrey Plaza was like just
Yep.
very like Hollywood starlet from the 20s, 30s, and 40s type of stuff. And so it got confusing, I would say, visually, or started confusing and got even more confused as time went on. But I enjoyed the confusion. Like every time he threw a new element in, I was like, hey, why not? This is fun. All of a sudden he's tripping for some reason, and like everything's all psychedelic. Doesn't make really any sense why that's happening, but it's happening.
Yeah, he's an alcoholic and a like drug user.
Right.
It's just so strange the nuances we get of everyone.
Yeah.
I liked his montages in his studio where he's like advising his students. He's like, yes, no, do it again. Arches. Like, I'm supposed to believe this guy's a genius.
I loved all that stuff.
I know you did, James.
And I think there's definitely, like, I've seen my fair share of like bad movies, and bad movies, truly bad movies, in my opinion, have no real artistic value to them. Like, you're literally wasting your time watching them. It's not stimulating your brain in any way whatsoever. Like, that's a truly bad movie, a complete waste of time. That is not how I would describe this. Like, this movie's either going to intrigue you or annoy you, but either way, it's going to do something to you. And I think there's merit in that. That's like where I think we could spend the next hour picking it apart. But why? It's not.
No, not even picking apart the problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this movie is so interesting because of how many things are going on, and like four different things in conflict with each other are going. You know, that like tones don't match the plot, don't match what we see. You know, it's just so interesting,
Right.
and it's definitely a worthwhile experience.
But like Kyle said, he needs somebody to tell him no. What does a movie that even closely resembles the bones of this movie look like if somebody had told him no and forced him to make a conventional version of this?
I'm not saying
I think it would have been
conventional.
far less interesting.
Here's the thing. This movie wants to be Citizen Kane.
Mm-hmm.
And Citizen Kanes exist, right? But this movie is not Citizen Kane. So what Kyle's getting at is maybe this could have been a Citizen Kane had, you know, a little bit more focus been placed, right? And a couple of revisions and, you know, some more voices in there or whatever. It could have been a Citizen Kane. It's definitely not, but that is what ultimately I think it's trying to be, right?
Yeah, I think this could have been a great movie because again, the bones are interesting. The setup, the plots, the interaction of all the characters, I found that all very interesting, like how they should interact. But then when I'm given on screen, although interesting as in like visually and jaw dropping in the industry of like, what am I watching? It didn't feel cohesive or important. Like, people are going to talk about this movie not because this was a achievement in cinema that is, you know, has pushed us forward like Citizen Kane have. People are going to talk about this movie because they're like, look at this vanity project from Coppola and look what he spent $120 million on. This movie will not be forgotten. That's for sure.
Yeah. And, you know, the some of the flaws of the film are what make it interesting, obviously. Like the fact that he has no patience in this movie, even for such a long movie. He'll set something up and then pay it off immediately. So my example for that, I already talked about the Robin Hood moment, but my example for that is the Vestal Virgin.
Yes.
Like, he introduces the Vestal Virgin and then immediately closes out the chapter on the Vestal Virgin, right? We have that entire arc never comes back. It's all done in one tight little package, right? So, whereas like I think a great movie would include a lot of these things, but like it would be a little bit more careful about how it, presented and paid off and things like that. It's not just going to be like doop doop. Okay, we're done. But
they have her wearing clothes made of megalon that like essentially make her invisible. And she says to the crowd, "You can see through me." I'm like, gee, I wonder if that's some foreshadowing right there. 5 minutes later.
Sure.
So like those things are fun and interesting because they're not like great, right?
Yeah.
Had it been great, it wouldn't have been nearly as fun or, as interesting on its face. So I enjoyed it, but like because it wasn't great,
Fair enough.
And and they wrap that up. Like she's introduced, there's the conflict, and then they resolve it immediately.
Right. And honestly, they showed the video clip of her or whatever. And I'm glad they showed it like 5 times because the first 2 times I didn't realize it was her. And then by the 4th time, I realized it was Adam Driver. And you know what I mean? I just like, it was shown so quickly that I just I wasn't connecting the dots right away.
The video clip was when the first walkout happened.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was like a guy, maybe my dad's age and his son or something like that.
Okay.
And they stood up very noisily. And they did a lot of futzing with rappers. It took them a long time for them to leave that theater. I was like, you guys can just go. You don't need to pick up or anything.
I mean, by then you've got Shia LaBeouf running around in ladies' clothes and
he was great,
handing USB sticks off to people and stuff like that.
I don't think he was great.
I thought he was great at it too.
I thought he was maybe the most appropriate for this movie. Of all the performances, his fit the most for what was happening in this movie.
I thought both him and Aubrey Plaza were like almost in a totally different movie, which I enjoyed.
No, they were in this movie. I think everyone else was in a different movie.
Their scene together was maybe the worst scene of the year.
The seduction
didn't bother me.
It was bad.
I'm not going to fight for the scene or anything, but it didn't. I didn't think it was any worse than a bunch of other things that were in this movie.
Again, it was pretty rushed, right? Like, it's the first time we're presented with the fact that like he's seducible by her, right? And then
he's seducible by anybody though. Like he's trying to hit. Yeah, he's trying to hit on the mayor's daughter. He's constantly hitting on his own sisters. He's hitting on everybody.
At no point do we know that he's interested in her.
No, but she is a manipulator. We know that she's a manipulator, right?
Yeah.
Like her goal, she has big goals for herself, and all of them seem to be wrapped up in her attractiveness and how much she can manipulate people with it. And so he's just another guy to manipulate, basically. And he's very needy. So it works out for them, I guess. I don't know. I was fine with it. It's a movie packed full of ideas, and a lot of them don't land in the perfect way, but all of them are explored just enough for me to be like, all right, I'm into it, even if like there was no conclusion to the exploration.
Yeah.
Or the conclusion to the exploration came like immediately after you brought in the element.
Oh, totally. Is there a takeaway from this movie? Like, is there a thought-provoking thing that you walked away with that this movie has added to the conversation?
I mean, I thought for me, not maybe added to the conversation, but more to get in the mind of like where Francis Ford Coppola is as a 80-something-year-old, probably reflecting on his life. Mm-hmm. And I think for most of this movie, he felt like civilization, humanity, whatever is doomed, right? He had a pretty pessimistic view of humanity. And then at the very end of the movie, he has this very optimistic view, or he's saying humanity has a chance and we can be better. So I guess for me, this was mostly Coppola working through his career and his thoughts on where are people going. Does that add to the conversation? I don't think so, but I think it was interesting to see him exercising these ideas on screen.
Yeah. I don't know if it's saying anything in any real cohesive way that anybody could take from the from the movie or anything like that.
Children are our future, maybe.
I'm curious to see. I mean, he's been working on this since the 80s. I'm curious to see what those first drafts, how those ended versus how it ends today, because I'm sure he rewrote this several times and over 40 years potentially. I bet it's changed a lot what the movie's saying, which might be part of the problem, is that he's trying to say a lot in probably not enough time to fully present those ideas.
I do say I would be obsessed with this movie if it was made with like the Godfather film stock during the time of when he's making the Godfather. Like, I think visually it would be so much more interesting than kind of like the very bright, claustrophobic look of modern day kind of filmmaking.
The constant magic hour.
Right, where it's like sets that are, small and crowds that are small, and
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this movie never feels big.
Except for the iron girder scene. That felt big to me.
That felt like it was filmed in a closet to me.
Yeah. that was visually one of my favorite scenes. I thought it was a cool scene, like with them on these rafters above the city.
Mm-hmm.
But it never felt big. Like even the CG shots of the city felt like just bad matte paintings. So
I also kind of wish it just had nothing to do with New York. Like, just call it New Rome. Don't set it anywhere. It's just this place that doesn't exist. Like the weird combination of it being New York, but also being New Rome,
with like the Empire State Building actually being there.
I liked it. I'm not mad at the movie for doing that, but it was a little distracting in the beginning to be like, why not just make this a city that like is a fantastical city or something?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You guys remember like recently the meme was going around about how guys just think about the fall of Rome.
Yeah, the Roman Empire.
Yeah. That totally like, as I was watching this, I was like, oh, this is his version of like, for the last 40 years, he's been thinking about the fall of the Roman Empire and how it relates to the United States. And so now he's made a movie about it.
Right. And he's naming one Caesar, who's like the martyr, and he's naming one Cicero, and
Right.
Yeah, quoting Shakespeare. And man, I would have rather seen a Baz Luhrmann version of this.
Yeah.
You know what I was thinking as we walked out is I really wish I could have seen this in 3D. I think it would have been spectacular in 3D.
Yeah.
Like really well done 3D. I think it could have been aided with a little bit of 3D. Avatar
or 4D.
I think it could have gotten 20 people in that theater.
Smell-o-vision.
like a D-box presentation of this.
Yeah.
No D-box. Just some depth. The girder scene would have been jaw-dropping in 3D.
Oh, James, I respect the fact that you're scared of heights, and so that was scary for you. But had you not been scared of heights, that scene was the equivalent of like, holding up cotton balls and taping them to a backdrop and like having a school play where you're like, oh, we're high up.
I mean, if you can make somebody feel something and not have it be like actual reality. Like, I've watched plays where I'm involved enough where I lose sense of like they're on a stage for fleeting moments. Why can't a movie do that for me?
What I'm saying is, James, I think that your fear of heights is valid, and it clouded your perception of that scene, because as someone who's not scared of heights, I specifically noted that scene as it's happening as the fakest looking thing I have ever seen.
You have ever seen, sure. Okay. The fakest looking
Kyle,
thing you've ever seen.
Yes, I would say of all the bad looking scenes in this movie, that was the worst of them.
So
there were several.
But again, I don't want to take away from your what it did to you. Fantastic. All right. And that's valid. I'm just saying, had you not been scared of heights, I think you would have looked at that and been like, this does not feel at all real.
Okay,
which I thought added to the aesthetic.
This is the difference, though. Remember that movie Fall?
Yeah.
Where they're up on the tall pole?
Yeah.
Didn't bother me at all.
Great. That movie, they actually were on a tall pole.
that whole movie is about like, oh, are they gonna fall? You'd think that movie could pull it off to like make me interested enough to like actually feel fear for the characters and stuff like that. Didn't do it. Now this one, which you claim looked fake, managed to do that.
Right. Obviously, it triggered something in you, James, and I'm not going to take away from that. I don't even think the purpose of that scene at all was to make you afraid. Both of them were at peace and very comfortable up there. I don't think
because of their power.
He wasn't asking his audience to be afraid for them in that moment. I think that was their like peaceful place. That was their Superman's solitude layer or whatever.
Fortress of Solitude.
Yeah, Fortress of Solitude.
Yes. Sure.
This was not a tension moment. I think for you it was, but that had nothing to do with what the purpose of the scene was.
I think I've misrepresented when I said I was fearing for them. Like I wasn't like in fear of them for them. I was like I bought into the fact that like if he couldn't do his power, that she was gonna fall. And I believed like that was a possibility the movie was actually going to execute.
Was she ever even gonna fall? Wasn't she just kind of casually walking on the?
I never got a sense that she was never like hanging from it.
Yeah,
or she just kind of walked.
No. She's gonna like there's a little gap between where he's sitting or standing and where she's standing, and she's like, "Do your power for me," and then she like leans over. Like if you're not gonna be able to do it.
He couldn't do the power.
I know she's like, do it for me. And then she leans over and he's able to do it because he doesn't want her to die. And she drops she drops the flower and the flower falls mid.
She drops the flower. I think her feet are even still on the girder. She just leans into him.
She just dropped the flower. And either way, I never felt like the movie was teasing, is she gonna die right now? Like I 100% knew that she was gonna say, do it for me, and her being there to be his muse, he was gonna do it. Like there was no tension in that moment at all.
Totally agree.
I felt tension.
Okay.
It wasn't debilitating tension, or I don't even think they were focusing in on it, but I think there was an element there of like I never thought the movie was actually gonna drop her, but why else do you do it on girders if not to like add some element of danger to it?
Well, they did it, I think, as a Fortress of Solitude kind of a thing to make it he could be up there comfortably where nowhere else could.
That was his peaceful spot.
He wasn't afraid of being up there because he's like,
and neither was she.
Yeah. He's like God, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
See, James, I spent the whole time wondering, well, what's suspending these girders? Because he's at the top of the building. There's just sky above him.
The same thing went through my mind too.
Okay.
I quickly dismissed it because if you did that for most of this movie, you would drive yourself nuts because there's constantly weird decisions. Like, why are they on scaffolding over the model of the like rickety scaffolding over the model at the beginning?
During these speeches.
No reason whatsoever for that.
I liked that scene.
I like the
rickety
too.
Scaffolding, the models, the huge like Shakespearean speeches. I was on board for whatever was happening during that moment.
I got to be honest, thinking back to the movie, which I've only seen once, I don't think there's a scene in this movie I didn't like. I think I liked all of it.
I did not. There's definitely scenes I did not care for in this movie.
I mean, some of them were unnecessary or like, maybe not as good as they could have been, but as taken as a whole, I can't think of anything. I think he really edited the crap out of this thing.
If that's how Audrey Plaza seduces people, I want no part of it.
I was fine with it. Anything else with Megalopolis that we need to talk about?
I mean, I could go on for another half hour, but no. Nothing else I need to say.
I'm really glad this movie exists.
Yeah, me too.
Would you rather have another Apocalypse Now or this movie?
Another Apocalypse Now.
I'd rather that this exists. I already have an Apocalypse Now.
I would rather Coppola, 30 years removed from his career, show up out of nowhere and be like, bam, classic, dropped on your feet. I would much rather have that than this.
James, let me rephrase your question, okay?
Sure.
And put it back to you. Now that both Apocalypse Now and this movie exist, which one would you take out of existence? Which one would you, if you had to remove one from the conversation, which one are you removing?
Right now?
Right now, James's gears are turning as he can try and rationalize Apocalypse Now.
No. I think I would probably get rid of Apocalypse Now because I've seen it enough.
I knew it. I've seen it enough times.
No, it never existed.
Yeah,
it never.
No one else can see it either. It's not just for you. It's poof, gone from existence.
I think
gone from the timeline.
Apocalypse Now had interesting and important political things to say, so probably would keep Apocalypse Now.
But it's also like a cinematic classic. Take out its message, just the actual look of that movie and the cinematography and the visuals are incredible. And the whole time I'm watching this movie, I'm like, this is the guy who made a Godfather and Apocalypse Now and The Conversation. And I'm not getting any of those classic visuals whatsoever. I'm getting I-beams in a closet.
I think there was some pretty classic stuff in here, but it was wrapped up in a bunch of stuff that maybe you didn't like. And it was wrapped up with like 18 different styles. I'll give you that. Whereas like Apocalypse Now and The Godfather have one style over the course of a 2+ hour thing. And clearly Coppola is not that guy anymore. He's not going to do one style through an entire movie.
This movie shows the changing of time by calendars, like pieces falling off of calendar pages falling off. And I don't think it's done ironically. I think that he was really trying to show the passage of time.
There were a lot of montages in this movie.
There were so many montages.
I enjoyed that part of it too.
I'm pretty sure they were spitting newspapers at one point. Like headlines were coming up on screen.
Why not?
I wish.
Why not?
I like that.
I either there were spinning newspapers with headlines or just headlines flashing on, but either way, newspapers were also being used just on screen to like move time along.
Yeah,
I thought it was. Go ahead.
I would watch this movie again.
Absolutely, at least one more time. See if it was a fluke. You know what I mean?
A fluke.
Meaning, like, if I watched it again, would I see the same things in it, or would it is just the first watch the interesting one, and everything beyond that is like, oh, okay, I see now. Like all the faults type of thing. It's not as fun if it's not new. Anyway, I forget what I was going to say, but
it does feel a little bit like if ChatGPT wrote a movie. Like right here, here's some ideas, plot points, characters. Now write the movie.
Oh, but by the way, I also like Robin Hood.
Make sure you include Robin Hood in there.
Include Robin Hood.
Every time we cut back to him, he's already loaded another arrow. We don't want to see him load it. We just want to cut back and it's ready to go.
Yeah.
And he's going to do it 3 times. Somehow gets off 2 arrows in one guy's body. Amazing.
First arrow was a kill shot. I was impressed.
Tiny little bow and arrow.
Tiny
Amazing.
bow and arrow.
Incredible draw strength.
Was anybody did you guys see the gunshot scene coming?
The gunshot scene
with the car and the kid?
I would because
that kind of shocked me when it happened.
That was probably the one surprise for me.
Right.
That was a surprise for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. I'm glad
I knew there was menace in that moment, but I didn't know what it would happen from it.
Right.
Okay, I would say if anything felt like classic Coppola, that one scene did. Just in like the editing, the quickness, how it all happened. I was like, oh, this is actually feels like okay. I'll give him one. He had one good scene in this movie.
Yeah, if it was shot with the lighting from Apple TV, then yes.
Well, I'm not saying how it looked. I'm just saying like how it was presented. That felt like the Coppola of the 70s that most people refer to when they talk about him. So
I also thought it was interesting that it had like 2 kind of troublesome people in it, right? In Shia LaBeouf, who's kind of a persona non grata in Hollywood right now.
Right.
And then also John Voight.
Voight,
has not been in a movie for a while. Some people would say that's due to his pro-Trumpism type stuff. Also, I think people just are not looking for John Voight at the same time. But
I thought he was good in this.
I mean, they
good.
made him very stupid.
He was in this movie. I will agree with you on that.
I mean, it didn't portray the richest man in the world as a very intelligent person. That's for sure.
The fact that he did what he did that mean he kind of was never fooled and knew what was going on the whole time, but let it happen anyways and then chop them?
No, I think he figured it out.
I think it's the latter. I don't think the movie really helps us along either way, but I think he figured it out.
I also enjoyed our microdose of Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
that felt like it was on the kitchen table or whatever.
Remember his death scene? I mean, again,
in black and white flashbacks.
Yeah, for like a 5-second death. That was very tacked on.
Yeah, that's one of those cases where I wish this movie was longer, because I think we actually could have had the Dustin Hoffman death. We could have had how did Giancarlo Esposito come around to Caesar? Like things could have been explained or shown, but no, who's got time for that?
Sure.
This should have been The Wire season 6, and it would have been amazing.
The Wire season.
The Wire season 6.
The Wire.
I have watched The Wire.
Why would this be The Wire season 6?
I'm saying this should have taken place in Baltimore.
Okay.
And it should have been this guy invents Megalon, and he wants to reform the city, and then all the city machinations working against him.
When did you watch The Wire?
James, you don't know me. I'm constantly watching The Wire.
Tell me one thing about The Wire, not besides Baltimore.
Besides Baltimore?
Yes.
What do you want me to tell you?
I don't know. Tell me something that someone who has watched The Wire would know.
Kyle, have you watched The Wire?
Yeah. What's Hamsterville?
It's a tiny little village with wild animals.
You haven't watched The Wire.
You haven't seen The Wire at all.
I have seen The Wire.
No idea.
I have seen The Wire. I've only seen the first season.
Okay.
Oh, okay. You've got to go on. Like,
yeah,
I would love to. I'm addicted.
You're not addicted. You've only watched one season, then you quit. That's the opposite of addiction.
Yeah. If I'm taking a 15-year break, but I'm just saying, season 6.
The best part about The Wire is when you pick up season 2, it'll be like a brand new cast, because every season they changed most of what was going on in that show.
Yeah.
There's a couple characters that
sometimes they're at the school system, sometimes they're at the harbor. Yeah.
And what season are they at the harbor?
5.
Okay. And how about the school system?
2.
Yeah, you've never watched The Wire. All right, moving on. You've watched season 1, maybe. Maybe. Tell me an actor in season 1.
I'm very impressed by his American accent.
There are some incredibly famous actors in season 1 of The Wire. Incredibly famous acters.
Agreed.
Name one of them.
There are. I can only think of one that's incredibly famous.
Also the guy, Lance Hendricks. Not Lance Hendricks, the guy from John Wick, the concierge.
I'm not sure you can describe him as incredibly famous if you can't name him.
Okay. There's one incredibly famous guy and several pretty famous people in that movie too. And that TV show.
Sure.
Yeah. Which is pretty awesome.
Dominic West is famous in my mind, but I don't think most people know his name.
He's not, but they would recognize him, especially if they watched The Crown recently.
Yeah.
He's not incredibly famous. He's only recognizable if you've seen specifically things he's in.
If they watch Punisher Warzone, he's in that too.
And he plays Jigsaw. His face is pretty chopped up in that movie pretty quickly. I would not say he's known for his face in that.
All right. Anything else with Megalopolis that we must say?
The last thing I'm going to say is halfway through this movie, I was sitting there and thinking, I'm not the first person to say this, but how many headlines are going to say Megalopolis?
A lot. That's like every other YouTube video.
Again, and I knew, even though I thought of it on my own, I'm like, this is not an original idea whatsoever. So,
which is kind of weird because do you guys think Coppola at the end of making this movie thought, I'm definitely going to get my money back?
No.
I don't think so either. I don't think he cares if it flops or not.
But it's still a flop. Whether he cares or not doesn't change the definition of a flop.
But like, is the definition of a flop didn't make its money back?
I think a definition of a flop, yeah.
Or
It's
is the
a movie-
definition of a flop didn't make what people thought it would make?
No, I think the definition of a flop is it did not make its money back. Whether people thought it would make its money or not doesn't matter.
So if you made a movie for $10,000, but people thought it would make $100 million, and then it made $10 million, you don't think they would call that a flop?
No, he's saying make your money back, so it has to at
Yeah.
least make its budget. So in your scenario, it made its budget.
In
Yeah,
my
so
scenario, though, if people thought it would make $100 million, it doesn't really matter what it cost. If it makes 10, it's
Right.
a flop.
I don't think
I
so.
mean,
I think
I
it's
think
a
people would
flop
consider it a flop if it didn't make what people thought it should make.
only if they're counting on it making that in order to like meet estimates or something. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right, but the
Right,
estimate doesn't have anything to do with how much it costs.
If Marvel makes the Marvels,
Mhm.
I'm just, and it costs them 200 million, but they're like, but you know what? We need this money to make 500 million for our books, right? And then it makes only 300 million.
It's
In
a flop.
Marvel's ideas, Marvel's is a flop. I'm using fake numbers. I don't know the real numbers here, right? Did the movie make its money back? Yes. Is it considered commercially a flop? No. But did Marvel be like, oh, this movie is a flop because we needed it to make double that? Yes.
Okay, so maybe something could be a flop if it doesn't make its budget, like it loses money, or it could be a flop if there are common expectations of what it'll make and it gets vastly less. than that.
Underperforms. Yeah.
Both could be considered a flop.
Either way, I think this movie is a flop. It's okay. Here's what I'm going to say. Maybe Coppola did not care about the money it made. He probably does care about the critical response. And that's critically, this is a flop.
Or
I don't think he even cares about that. In interviews, he's not acting like he cares about that at all.
Yeah, because he's Coppola. I'm not going to care.
But here's the thing. Don't you think he cares if people see the movie or not?
No, I
Like-
think he does want people to see it, and he does want people to come around to it, like they have they have with the one we've mentioned a bunch of times. about the
Apocalypse
Vietnam
Now.
War. But you're right, Apocalypse Now.
Oscar-winning Apocalypse Now. Yeah, it took people a long time to come around to that one.
There were a lot of people, including audiences, that didn't love Apocalypse Now.
But
it was pretty savage during its time.
It also won Oscars. So
I
This
think
will
that
probably win an Oscar.
it probably will not.
probably a Razzie or two.
It will not win an Oscar. I do.
You don't think it'll get nominated for anything?
Oh, it'll at least be nominated for costume design. I think it's a guaranteed costume design nomination. A win? I don't know.
I thought the production in general was pretty well done.
Yeah, it's not going to win production design whatsoever, even be nominated. Zach, what were you saying?
I think he would consider it. I don't think he'll ever consider it a flop, right? He has too much invested in it emotionally. But I think that if the audience doesn't see it, right? If it gets, it sells 700,000 tickets and that's it, and then no one ever thinks about it again, then I think it's a failure for what he wanted it to be. I think he wanted it to be a cultural zeitgeist kind of movie. And I don't think it's going to be that way.
Yep, I agree with that. All right, Megalopolis. Let's letterbox rank it. What are you guys going to give it out of 5 stars?
2 stars.
I don't know, James.
4 stars.
Yeah. 3 stars.
Oh, Zach, I think you're being generous.
Well, I enjoyed it.
I absolutely enjoyed it. I don't know if
But did you
if
like
it'll
it?
hold at 4 on a second viewing. I liked it. I liked it enough to want to see it again.
Is this a top 20 movie, James, of the year?
Of the year? Probably so far. I mean, we haven't hit the Oscar bait movies yet. So
I will say I officially do consider this a bad movie. I don't think it's successful. And part of the reason I enjoyed it was because of how much of a debacle it was. But also I did enjoy the big swing of it. And I respect the big swing of it. Yeah, I just think it's a little bit too messy to be considered good.
Fair enough. Also, I haven't called it good either.
No,
just that I was entertained
just give
by
it 4 stars.
Yeah, I was entertained by it for sure.
Yeah.
All right. A 2, a 3, and a 4 for Megalopolis, all over the place on this one. Speaking of big swings, we made a list this week. This is our top 10 movies that take a big swing in honor of Megalopolis. Who wants to go first with our list for this week?
Can we
Let's rank some
define
movies.
Yeah, it's a good idea, Kyle. Can we define a big swing?
You can define it for your own list.
Okay.
Go
Zach,
for it.
how'd you define a big swing?
Yeah. So when I thought of movies to take a big swing, I thought it was they didn't go a conventional film route. They decided to do something bold, something unconventional, something splashy, something risky with their movie. So they took a big risk with not so much the subject matter, although perhaps, but with actually the basic components of filmmaking, right? And so they decided to give someone something very different from what they've gotten in the past and hoped it worked. And for the most part, all of mine worked. I didn't really include many that didn't, but that's what I meant by big swing. My number 10 is Eraserhead by David Lynch. So Eraserhead is a very strange movie. A lot of it is unexplained. A lot of it is hard to watch. It goes to crazy places. It it stars what's his name from Shawshank?
Tim Robbins.
Tim Robbins?
Yeah, Tim Robbins.
Really? Tim Robbins stars in this movie?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I did not know that.
Oh, is that not true?
I don't think it's a named actor who plays the titular character.
Jack Nance.
Oh yes, the other guy.
He does kind of look like Tim Robbins, though.
I was like,
See how you
Tim Robbins in this movie?
That's funny. In my mind, it was Tim Robbins the whole time.
Funny, yeah.
That's hilarious. Okay, so but this movie absolutely has a message it's conveying. Like it is about something, and it tells it in the most unconventional way possible. It's a super strange, crazy movie. I think it's all in black and white. It's just made in 1977. It's just a crazy movie. And David Lynch, I think, is a crazy director that puts the most interesting things on screen. I mean, he has some of my favorite movie moments in films that he's made. He's just takes incredible big swings that often pay off. Now, I didn't personally like Eraserhead. I gave it a 1.5 stars. But I respect the art, the craft.
Nice. I'll go next. My list is very similar to Zach's, I imagine, in the structure of what we considered. Basically movies that could have told something in like a pretty conventional way, but for some reason made some left turn decisions in the way it presented things, and it either worked or it didn't. But either way, the attempt was interesting. My number 10 is Tenet, a movie that I don't particularly love. I've only seen it once, so I probably need to give it another shot. Especially now that I think I understand the construction of the movie more than I did on first watch. Like, I think the construction of it confused me, and the fact that like I didn't feel like it really had much of an ending confused me, because the movie kind of ends in the middle in a weird way. But I left the movie that I watched at home respecting it, but also confused by it, especially since my expectations of what like a Christopher Nolan movie is didn't feel met in the moment. It felt like he had over-engineered something that didn't need to be as complicated as it turned out to be. But I think on second viewing, it might play differently. It might not. Either way, it was a big swing that didn't quite land for me, but I respected it in the end. My number 10.
Nice. My number 10 is a movie from one of my favorite working directors, Damien Chazelle last year or 2 years ago, I guess, he gave us Babylon, which I was very excited about, being Margot Robbie and Brad Pitt and taking place during sort of the golden era of Hollywood as it's making its transition from silent into the talkie era. I was really excited for this movie. The trailer made it look big and opulent, and there'd be a lot of just insane visuals going on. And the movie delivered all of that and more. And maybe it delivered all of that cranked up to like 20. And I was maybe hoping for 11. And this movie gives you way more than 11. This movie is nonstop. And it's a movie where in one moment I was loving it. There'd be a party going on. I'm like, this party is insane, and this is the greatest party I've ever seen on screen. And then the next moment, something happens in that party. I'm like, this is one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen in a movie. That's happened during my favorite party moment I've ever had. And this movie for me was just a whiplash roller coaster of some incredible scenes that I thought were great, and some just moments that made me so uncomfortable, and this made me wanted to turn the movie completely off. And I think Damien Chazelle was going for something big, and he did something big, and he took a huge swing. And I think a lot of people this movie didn't work for, and this movie almost worked for me, but didn't quite make it.
Nice.
Yeah, that movie was messy. My number 9 is Avatar. I think that James Cameron could have done anything he wanted, and he picked something that was probably, when he started the project, not all the technology to create it had been invented yet, would be my guess. He probably had to invent technology to make it happen. And he created out of nothing an event movie and a 3D craze. And he did it with something that was actually fairly forgettable, right? He made something fairly disposable that was must-see filmmaking. And it could have flopped so hard, right? There was nothing intrinsically about the story that, necessitated that it had to make it big. But it could have been the worst flop of all time, and it worked, and it was and the sequel worked, and it's impressive. So that was a very big swing, I thought.
Plus, like, he had no track record of being able to make alien planet CG characters. I mean, I guess like he made a career off of sequelizing other people's creativity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas Avatar, clearly from his own brain, for better or for worse. It's just a very weird thing to do.
Well, he did direct Terminator.
Sure.
I know he's known for Terminator 2, and like he's known for Aliens, but he did make Terminator.
You're right. For some reason, I forget that he directed that because it
doesn't feel like a Cameron film compared to everything else he did.
Right. My number 9 is Noah from 2014. This is Darren Aronofsky's version of the biblical story of Noah. And I mean, he probably swung too big on this one. Like at times, I mean, when the trees start battling people and stuff like that, it's barely based on the text, I would say. But this is another one that's just very messy, and I love it. I like watching. I think if this was told straight, then why would you get a guy like Darren Aronofsky to make that movie? I'm really not interested in it unless he's putting his own weird touches on it. But also, like, Darren Aronofsky, Noah was pre-Mother, and his movies certainly have a style to them, and they're not for everybody, but they were, I don't know if grounded in reality, but just not as fantastical as this. So he's kind of leaving the zone that people were used to seeing him in, and applying this religious story presented as a fantasy film. And I dug it, even if it's certainly not perfect. But it definitely was a big swing. Noah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
My number 9 is 2012's John Carter. This is a story about a Civil War captain who stumbles upon a cave and gets transported to Mars for reasons unknown. And he's dropped into a conflict on the planet of Mars between various warring alien groups and gets involved in them and kind of becomes a freedom fighter for one side of the aliens. And this movie is maybe not a big swing visually or storytelling wise, but it's more of a big swing by Disney's decision to make it. 2012, Star Wars had ended back in 2000 and I don't know, when's the last Star Wars movie before that? 2005, whenever Rise of the Sith, Revenge of the Sith happens.
2003.
Whatever, somewhere around there. Yep. Marvel was taken off. The new Star Wars wasn't happening yet. And Disney's like, well, we need to fill this sci-fi void. So they decided to make John Carter. Not a bad movie at all. I enjoy it. It stars mega famous Dominic West, as well as Taylor Kitsch, who was just hot off of Friday Night Lights, who I like that TV show a lot. The problem with John Carter is this is an old story. I believe it's written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the Sherlock Holmes guy.
Mm-hmm.
George Lucas based a lot of Star Wars off of John Carter. So when you watch it, especially having just watched the prequels, because a lot of the prequels borrowed from John Carter feels like a ripoff of the prequels. There's even a scene where John Carter is trapped in an arena. He's tied to a pillar with another person, and these 3 animals come out to fight him, which is an exact same scene in Attack of the Clones. Problem is, though, George Lucas took that scene from John Carter. So it's a movie that feels like a ripoff of Star Wars, even though it's the other way around. And I think when people saw this movie and were like, well, I don't want to see a Star Wars ripoff, and it just flopped. So maybe not a swing in that sense, but definitely a swing in why it was made.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. My number 8 is Brazil from 1985. It's a Terry Gilliam film. And if you've seen it, it's pretty crazy. It's a dystopian science fiction film with kind of like this authoritarian society. It's kind of very darkly funny. It's very surreal, and it's just crazy. And
Yeah.
In college, I had to write an essay on this film, like a pretty long, 15-page essay or whatever. And so I watched this film 5 times in the course of a week, and it's just a fever dream of a movie. And it's just amazing that like these kind of films get like funded and created, and alongside like When Harry Met Sally, and then also Brazil. And I'm super glad this movie exists. But certainly not for everybody, and it's not something that is going to make $1 billion. But it's a strong take on a story for sure.
I wrote a paper on 12 Monkeys in college.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And yeah, Terry Gilliam, you should not binge watch that. It's too much to take in
Right.
1 week.
You
But
shouldn't
they're
binge
good.
watch all of
Yeah.
Terry Gilliam's movies.
No, it's just like Zach had to do with Brazil. I watched 12 Monkeys over and over, and I would pause and rewind scenes, and it's too much. It drives you insane.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
My,
He does have John Cleese as Robin Hood in one of his movies, though.
Mhm.
Just FYI.
Thank you for that Robin Hood tidbit, Zach.
my number
welcome.
8 is A period I period Artificial Intelligence by Steven Spielberg.
There's no colon in there.
No colon.
Oh, okay.
Which I think is a pretty infamous movie, possibly. It's directed by Steven Spielberg, but originally championed by Stanley Kubrick. Kubrick never filmed a frame, right?
He wrote this movie.
He
It's
wrote it.
mostly his screenplay.
Okay. Sure. According to Wikipedia, screenplay by Steven Spielberg. No credit.
Okay.
No credit to Kubrick, but I do believe that clearly there was a roadmap. It was a passion project of Kubrick that
Yes.
he never got to make, basically. And this felt like a big swing to me from Steven Spielberg, just because it's a darker movie than what he would typically make. This is like he was certainly making Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan and stuff like that had dark themes in it, but man, this is kind of a dystopian sci-fi movie that has a very slow pace compared to typical Spielberg movies, and a pretty bummer ending as well. And those are just not things that you expect to encounter when you watch Steven Spielberg movies, or at least in the year 2001. It wasn't something that everybody expected when they went to the movie theater. And I think it was a pretty big swing for him. Also, famously, not a super successful movie box office wise or critics wise, but I think there's definite merits in the idea of like a guy trying to tackle something in the voice of his friend, basically. Like I think it's clear when you watch it that he's trying to make a Spielberg movie that's influenced by Kubrick. And what you end up with is AI. And that was the big swing that I appreciate in AI, even if it's not my favorite Spielberg movie of all time.
Cool.
All right. My number 8 is 1996's Romeo plus Juliet. Zach, you were mentioning that you wish Megalopolis was directed by Baz Luhrmann, and this is definitely a Baz Luhrmann film. In this movie, this is obviously Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, with DiCaprio playing Romeo, Claire Danes playing Juliet. And this movie is maybe Baz Luhrmann at his greatest, in my opinion, where he's taking the text of Romeo and Juliet pretty much word for word as Shakespeare wrote it, but he's filming it in a very 90s style. And we're talking with the clothing. Instead of sword fights, people are drawing guns. The costumes are, I would say, anachronistic, where there's sort of a blend between what you'd expect a character in Romeo and Juliet to be wearing versus what you expect a character in the 90s to be wearing. There's cars involved. This whole thing is bright and colorful and big, and maybe not what you would expect from a telling of a Shakespeare story. But Baz Luhrmann somehow makes it all work. And this is a movie that I watched recently, or I rewatched recently, and found out that I really enjoy this movie.
Nice.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. My number 7 is Synecdoche, New York. It's a Philip Seymour Hoffman film, written and directed by Charlie Kaufman. And again, structurally, it's just so unusual, and it's so meta, and it folds in on itself, and it tells a story in a very unconventional way. Feels very personal, and yeah, it's just unlike any other movie, and it's certainly it's a big ask for anyone that watches it. And I just think it's a good example of a big swing.
Agreed.
I didn't care for that movie. I tried to like it.
Sure.
My number 7 is Grindhouse. This was a double feature, featuring films by Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino. I think just the concept of a double feature film is kind of a big swing, or at least it was circa 2007. The idea that like every theater was going to have to run this 3 hours and 20 minutes of films, and there would be like trailers from other filmmakers cut into the middle of it. The trailers might change depending on which theater you're watching the movie in. That was a fairly original concept, I would say, at the time. And also that the two filmmakers limited their budgets to what true grindhouse films would use on their films. So I thought that was an interesting concept as well. I thought overall it was a swing that neither of them necessarily had to make. It's just something they wanted to do and so they did it for better or for worse. And I think most people, maybe Robert Rodriguez has much worse films than Planet Terror in his filmography, but for Tarantino, he basically made what people consider his worst film, packaged within this grindhouse concept. And I don't necessarily agree with that. Well, maybe I do. Is it his worst film?
Death Proof?
Death Proof.
I think it is.
Right. I think the difference is I might agree that it's his worst film, but I also don't think Death Proof is a bad movie. So maybe he just hasn't made a bad movie for me.
Maybe. I think the first half of Death Proof is great. Like when they're in the bar and the girls are talking and then Kurt Russell shows up. And I like all of that. And then there's I guess a small time cut.
So you don't like the car
back
chase.
half.
You don't like the car chase.
The car chase is fine. I don't care for the characters or the dialogue or the setup to the car chase. So by the time the car chase happens, I didn't really care anymore.
You don't like the cafe scene.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah. Like I liked the first group much more than the second group.
Sure. And do you remember Planet Terror at all?
I've never seen Planet Terror. I just saw
okay.
Death Proof. I haven't done the double feature.
Interesting.
Oh, interesting.
Should I do the double feature? I mean, should I see Planet Terror?
I don't think it would hurt. It's basically his version. It's Robert Rodriguez's horror version of a superhero movie.
Okay. Is that the woman with the machine gun leg or something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's what it is. Yeah. So I think it took a swing. It was successful in its format, maybe not as successful in it from an individual film perspective, but I enjoy it. My number 6.
That was your number 7.
My number 7.
Yep. My number 7 is Fitzcarraldo, a 1982 movie directed by Werner Herzog. This is the story about a megalomaniac who wants to build a opera house in the Peruvian Amazon. To do that, he needs rubber. And to get rubber, he needs to ship it across the Amazon. And the only way he can do that is by moving his large steamed vessel from one part of the Amazon over a mountain to the other side of it. So this is based on a true story. And you would think when Werner Herzog was making this movie, he would use special effects to simulate how we're going to move a 30 or 300 ton steamer out of the water across a mountain to the other side of the water. Nope. Werner Herzog just did it. He's like, you know what? We're just going to move this ship and we're going to film it. And this movie is storied for its unfortunate mistreatment of people, the deaths of people on the crew. Klaus Kinski, who plays Fitzcarraldo, was so hated by everyone. And Zach, you might have mentioned this at a previous episode, that a local Peruvian tribal leader actually offered Werner Herzog to kill Klaus Kinski for him. And Werner was like, nah, we need him for the rest of the movie. We can't kill him right now. This movie also was like 40% shot when the original actor who was playing the Fitzcarraldo got too sick to finish it, so they had to start again. So again, this is one of these storied fiasco of a production. But when you watch the actual movie, because it's all there on screen, you really buy the scale of everything that's happening. This is one of my favorite Herzog movies, even if when you don't dig too deep because you don't want to learn too much about how it was made.
Right. Yeah, that's a great pick, actually. My number 6 is The Fountain from 2006.
Oh,
this is an Aronofsky film. And he does take big swings in his movies. But this stars Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz, and it tells 3 stories. One that takes place in the present, one that takes place in the 16th century of a Spanish conquistador, and one that takes place in the future. And the main characters are all played by these same actors, and they tell parallel complementary stories about like love and, dying and stuff like that. And that in itself is, it's a little unconventional, but it's still fine. But the last like 30 minutes of this movie, these 3 stories jump back and forth at such a frenetic pace. It's like very intense. The ferocity that they're jumping around back and forth, and it's just a lot. But I think it's very successful. I really enjoy this film. But yeah, it's definitely a wild kind of ride, and I think it's a big swing.
Do you remember the future version of Hugh Jackman has like all these tree ring tattoos up his arm?
I don't remember that.
Okay, so like how he marks time is he tattoos himself, and they're kind of like tree rings,
Okay.
and they're all different like shades and widths and lengths and everything. I've always thought that was the coolest tattoo, and if I had the gumption to like tattoo a full sleeve, I would just do that. I thought it looked
That's
so cool in
awesome.
that movie.
That's cool.
Just concentric circles going up the arm. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm into it. You should do it, Kyle.
Uh,
Don't do it on your arm. Just face tattoo all the way up your face.
just go like up the neck, up the lip.
Exactly.
Keep going. Yep.
Yep.
Perfect.
My number 6 is another Spielberg movie, Unintentional. Hook. You guys remember Hook? What a weird movie that is.
Yeah.
Like, Hook is not. I think it was a big swing for him. I don't know. Was Hook a successful movie for Spielberg?
Yeah.
Like financially successful, creatively successful?
I would say
yeah.
financially successful, yes. Creatively successful, maybe. Critically successful, probably not.
Right.
I don't think this is many people's favorite Spielberg movie.
I remember seeing this in 1991. I was 13 or something like that, 12. And I thought it was weird back then too. But I liked it because it was weird. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, it makes sense that, Peter Pan, the boy that never grew up type of thing. But here's a movie about an old guy, Peter Pan, who's like rediscovering his childhood or the power of a childhood imagination or a childlike imagination. All of those things are interesting and thought provoking on paper, but what you get is like Robin Williams just being kind of boring in the beginning of the movie and weird at the end of the movie, and then what's his name, the guy who plays actual Hook.
Dustin Hoffman.
Dustin Hoffman is just kind of off the rails in this.
Unrecognizable. Like you can tell me a million times that's Dustin Hoffman. I will never believe you.
Yeah, he looks like he's having a lot of fun in this movie. He might be the only person having fun in this movie, but he is having a lot of fun. The whole bangarang of it all, and Rufio and the Lost Boys,
Rufio,
as weird as they are at the table when they imagine the food that they're eating. I don't know if these things are in the classic story of Peter Pan, but they're definitely in Steven Spielberg's version, and they felt very weird at the time, and they continue to feel weird to this day. And it's one of those movies where if somebody tells me that they hate the movie, I'm okay with it. And if they say that it's their favorite Spielberg movie, I get that too, because it's just weird enough that certain people would attach themselves to it. Felt like a big swing. Some people might not agree whether he connected, but I enjoy it. My number 6, Hook.
I don't like it when people like stuff their faces and overeat, and I especially don't like it in movies. Like whenever someone's super hungry in a movie and they see food and they start like shoveling food in and filling their cheeks up, I find that gross. And I think that started with Hook in that imaginary food scene where all the kids are like shoveling food into their mouths like chipmunks, and it's like, oh, this is disgusting.
Said like a person who never really had to think about what food, like your next meal or anything.
No, I'm very fortunate. I've never been hungry.
Right.
But if I was, I have some GD manners and take small bites.
I don't think you would. I think if you were really starving, it wouldn't matter what you look like.
Probably
while
not.
You eat.
Well, okay. I can get myself in trouble. So let's just move on. All right. My number 6 is 2018's Sorry to Bother You. This is directed by Boots Riley. It stars Lakeith Stanfield. It takes place in Oakland, but it's kind of like everything's a little off. This is like maybe an alternate reality, or it's just sort of like a different version of our own reality. Lakeith Stanfield plays a telemarketer for sort of a mysterious company. He learns how to code switch and how to like better sell to, let's say, white people by using different voices. And as he gets more and more successful within this company, he starts learning more and more about what the company is actually doing, what they're about, until it gets to a maybe one of the wildest reveals I've ever seen in a movie. Sort of the conclusion of this, which I don't want to spoil. You guys know what I'm talking about. If you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, if you want to see a big swing, you got to watch Sorry to Bother You. This movie is definitely, it's funny. It is a satire of American culture and consumerism. It's a satire of race relations in America. But Boots Riley presents the whole thing kind of like a dark Michel Gondry film, where it's very creatively presented. There's a lot going on in this movie, and I think for a lot of people, this movie turns them off, and I completely understand why it would. But this movie worked for me.
Yeah, that movie's crazy.
Did anybody watch the Amazon show that Boots Riley made?
About the big person, like the literally big person?
Yeah.
No, so I saw the trailer. I thought it was a movie, and I got excited. And then I saw it was a TV show, and I got turned off.
I mean, it's a limited series, so it's like,
okay,
it's done. You can you can watch the entire story, but it got like decent Rotten Tomatoes score, but like no awards love. But anyway, I don't know anybody that's actually watched it, but I'm curious. Zach,
what's your number 5?
My number 5 is They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Which is a 1969 film by Sidney Pollack. And this is a movie. It stars Jane Fonda. It takes place during the Great Depression, and there's a dance marathon, and like the winner of whoever dances the longest, like whatever couple dances the longest, gets like a prize. I forget what it is exactly. It's either like $1,000 or like a year of free groceries or something like that. So everyone's kind of desperate to win it, and they all have their own different stories. And so they try not to stop dancing, and it goes on forever. And it kind of has the same vibes as like Mother. Like it becomes a horror movie of people that are so desperate that they can't stop. And it's about, exploitation and poverty, and it just goes to crazy places. And when it starts, it's like just a conventional movie about like a dance marathon. And the movie's insane, and it's really poignant, and it's great satire. And yeah, it's really interesting. So it's called They Shoot Horses, Don't They?
I need to watch that.
Yeah, I've always been intrigued by this movie just because the title is, I don't understand why it's called that title.
It's a great title. Yeah.
Did they ever explain the title or no?
It's a line that they say in the movie, and it essentially is the idea of like, if a horse is not going to be able to do its job, they'll just shoot it. They'll put it out of its misery, but no one's going to put you out of your misery. You just have to go through it.
All right.
That's my take.
My number 6.
Yeah.
5. My number 5 is Popeye. This is my Robin Williams section of the list, evidently. Popeye, starring Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall. Shelley Duvall plays Olive Oil, and Robin Williams plays Popeye. This movie was directed by Robert Altman, and it feels like an insane version of Popeye when you consider what came before it. The cartoons from the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. There's been many iterations of Popeye. And then the Sunday morning, whatever, the comic strips of Popeye that went on for forever. They decided to adapt that, and for some reason, Robert Altman did it. The Nashville guy, the MASH guy, directed a live action version of Popeye, and it wasn't very well received, but I like it a lot. It's very interesting. One, it sets Popeye as a musical, which is interesting. Yeah. And also it has Altman style where characters just kind of talk over each other through most of the movie. In fact, the only times they're not really talking over each other is when they're singing. It's for a movie based on a spinach eating sailor that's based on a comic. It's a very vibey movie. And that is weird. Why you would do that? Why you would take that approach to this subject matter doesn't make any sense. I feel like it was a very big swing, and most people, I think, didn't connect with the movie very much. I'm not sure who he was really making it for, because Popeye is kind of a kid's thing.
Yeah.
But Popeye the movie does not feel like a movie made for kids. Maybe it's a movie kids could watch, but it's not one made for kids. Yeah, big swing. I think it connected for what it was trying to do, but I think most people, their expectations were very different for what this should have been. My number 5, Popeye. Or 6.
I do like the look of this movie.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, well, when I was a kid. Yeah. And again, I saw it as a kid. It did not feel like it was a kid's movie at all.
Right.
But it is sort of shot on like it looks like a shot on a set. It's all brightly lit. It's in a harbor.
Oh yeah, they shot it
but
with
it
long
feels like
lenses,
a cartoon. Yes.
So that it would duplicate kind of the side shot of a comic strip.
Yeah.
And so you see the characters move into like a house, and then they do a scene, and then they move to a different house and do a scene. And then occasionally it cuts away from that kind of like storybook style. But it has really long shots from long lenses of the town folk moving around and interacting.
Yeah. A lot of lateral movement from them.
Yeah. Zach, have you ever seen Popeye?
No, I haven't.
I think you'd be intrigued by the movie.
I don't think Zach would like it, but he might. Yeah.
I think he'd get something out of it from like a artistic element. I think he could also like the movie. I think it's possible you would like it as well. But even if you didn't like it, you would respect it.
I like the character Popeye.
And you like Robert Altman, right?
Yeah.
Nashville's like your favorite movie of all time.
And when you watch the Popeye cartoons, you're like, Robin Williams, perfect, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Olive oil, you're thinking Shelley Duvall fits right in.
It's worth it just to see Shelley Duvall in a movie that you've never seen. She's
her spaghetti arms.
She's really great in it.
Does she do that?
I can't remember if she does the spaghetti arms.
I mean, that's her whole thing, is she's like insanely skinny.
Yeah.
Like floppy and like loose.
Screechy.
Yep.
How many Shelley Duvall movies do you think you guys can name? Like on top of your head right now?
3.
I think 3. Yeah.
3.
Yeah. Nashville, Shining, Popeye.
Oh, I didn't even think of Nashville.
4.
Oh, what's the fourth one?
3 Women.
3 Women. That was the other
Never
one.
seen 3 Women.
Oh, if you like Shelley Duvall, you should see 3 Women.
I don't know. I've only seen her 3
great.
times. I don't know if I like Shelley Duvall or not.
It's great.
I mean, 3 Women is good even without Shelley Duvall, but she's the lead in it. And she's great in it.
She's great in Nashville. If you guys forgot, she plays like a roller girl in that movie.
I don't like Nashville, so
that's fair.
I'm sure she was fine in it, but I didn't like it.
My number 5 is at least a director bingo, and this is 2017's Mother! With Darren Aronofsky. We each have a Darren Aronofsky on our list. This movie stars Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem. They are a married couple who live in let's say a remote farmhouse. Is probably the best way to describe it. Javier Bardem is an artist. We don't know much about him, and Jennifer Lawrence just seems to be his stay-at-home wife / muse. And early in the movie, some people, strangers, show up at their house, and Javier Bardem, being this welcoming guy, invites them in, serves them dinner, and after a while, Jennifer Lawrence is like, "Okay, this is nice. We've had this nice time with our strangers. We should, invite them to leave and move on with our night." And Javier Bardem wants them to stay, and more people start showing up, and the house gets more packed, and Jennifer Lawrence gets more anxious about the people who are coming in, and the house starts to break, and then the allegories happen, and this movie gets insane. It starts very simple, and then it becomes again, if I was to tell you how it ends, you guys know, but if I was to tell people who haven't seen it before how it ends, it would kind of ruin the surprise of the movie, because this movie just does not stop. More and more people show up. Jennifer Lawrence is getting more and more anxious, and it just gets crazier and crazier, the events that happen in this house. And obviously this movie is a big swing storytelling wise, because it's not an easy movie to watch. I like it, but there's definitely things that people are not going to like. And there's even moments in this movie that I don't care for. But also think about Jennifer Lawrence in 2017. She was probably at the height of her popularity, right? She's just off Hunger Games, had done Passengers, maybe not quite Margot Robbie popular yet, but very popular. And then she does this movie in 2017. I can only imagine how many people were like excited to see the next Jennifer Lawrence movie, expecting Passengers, Hunger Games, and then sat down and got this. I wish I was in the theater for that.
Yeah, it's a crazy movie. My number 4 is Birdman. Or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance from 2014. This is a Michael Keaton film, and there's a couple of reasons why I include on the list. One is it's presented as if it's one take. Now, obviously, it wasn't filmed that way, but it's presented that way, and that leads to a very like fast, brisk pace to the film. It feels like you're on a train that won't stop, which creates a very interesting film, you know, because most films rely so heavily on editing. This movie has to do all its editing with blocking and camera work. And it creates a sense of motion that you don't get in other films. And then also the plot. I mean, the plot goes into surreal fantasy areas that it didn't have to. It can tell the same story without going into those areas. And so it's certainly putting itself out there and like going out on a ledge with some of these choices. And for me, it totally worked. But it might not have, you know, I know for Kyle, it didn't. So I think Birdman really did take a big swing, and it paid off for them. They won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best Cinematography. So it worked out for them.
They can't get it right every year.
Right.
You know, this is before the Academy really looked inward and decided to change up who was voting and to diversify their body. So I honestly, any Oscar that was awarded before 2019, I think doesn't count anymore.
Makes sense.
Yeah. They're just all be nulled.
Why?
Put an asterisk by all of them.
Moonlight is the measuring stick of... Oh, no, wait. Moonlight was 2016, right?
Yeah. I don't know when the
what
Academy
happened in
started.
2019?
I don't know. Isn't that when the Academy did a big shakeup on their membership and everything?
I feel like Birdman is a very unconventional Oscar.
No, I know.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just being difficult.
If you were saying that during Green Book year, I would agree, but Birdman is very unconventional. My number 4 is Cloud Atlas, of course. This movie is very messy, I would say. This is the Wachowskis, hot off the back of the failure of Speed Racer. I think they just decided that they don't care anymore. They're just going to make the weirdest thing they can think of, and they're going to hire Tom Hanks and Halle Berry and Susan Sarandon to be in this 6-part is it an anthology film? I don't know. There's like 6 different stories in 6 different timelines in 6 different languages. And most of the actors carry over to each individual of the 6 stories, but not always. Like Tom Hanks, I believe, is in all of them, but like Susan Sarandon's in 3 of them. Anyway, doesn't matter. The point is, anybody who puts Tom Hanks on screen speaking a completely foreign language that's made up for the film in the first part of the movie, and then by the end he's like a gangster that's like dropping people off the sides of buildings. It's just it's a wild movie that isn't necessarily a great movie, but when you finish its how long is this movie? It's like really long, right? What's the runtime on 172 minutes. So nearly 3-hour movie. You'll walk out at thinking, man, I've really seen something. And it's up to you to decide whether it was worth that time investment or not. I find it interesting to the tune of one viewing so far. Although I do have it on Blu-ray and I will rewatch it someday. But I think it was a big swing and an interesting one at minimum. Cloud Atlas, my number 3 or 4, one of those.
Another movie I've never seen. Maybe I should.
I haven't either.
One. Oh, you haven't
I've seen the
either?
first 20 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, did you get to like the second story or did you not even get through the first? Or do you not even remember?
I don't. I've never seen it, so I didn't get to the first one.
I remember someone shooting someone in a parking garage van or something like that. That's really all I remember.
Okay, so you didn't get to like the alien planet storyline.
I don't think so.
Okay. You gotta watch Cloud Atlas, man.
Yeah, I plan to.
Find yourself 3 hours and really let yourself sink into it.
Get it done.
Zach, if you ever want to watch Cloud Atlas, I will come watch it with you.
Okay. I'll come watch it with you. How about
you can come watch it with me.
Be less distracting at your place. Probably.
When we put up the 98-inch, we'll watch Cloud Atlas on it.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. My number 4 is The Northman. This is a 2022 movie by Robert Eggers. His first movie was The Witch, which I think he made for $4 million, which was a critical success, if not a financial success. His next movie was The Lighthouse, which he made for $10 million. I don't know financially how well it did, but I think people liked it overall, even though it was a pretty weird movie. And at that point, a studio was ready to give him money. So he was given, I don't know, somewhere between $70 to $90 million to make his Viking movie. He built sets. He moved out to Iceland. He basically told the story that was Hamlet is based upon, about a young Viking prince whose father is murdered and whose mother is kidnapped by his uncle. And then this prince grows up to exact his revenge upon the people who have wronged him. And this movie flopped. And I think the reason why it flopped is because Robert Eggers is not a conventional filmmaker, and he wasn't going to give us a conventional Viking battle movie. Now, this movie has Vikings. This movie has some pretty cool battles. It has swords and axes, but it also has some super weird imagery in it with like Willem Dafoe as a blind seer. And there are like large golems that come to life. And there's just some trippy imagery of bloodlines being connected within space. And just if you're in the Robert Eggers mindset, it all makes sense and it all works. But if you're just expecting like a conventional period piece about fighting Vikings, you're getting more movie than you're expecting. And I like this movie, but definitely a big swing on Eggers' part and a miss critically. But I think, miss commercially, but critically, I think this was a hit.
Nice. My number 3 is a stop motion film called Anomalisa from 2015.
Mm-hmm.
This is a Charlie Kaufman film, and it's such an odd movie. It is a stop motion movie for adults about a man who's kind of having a existential crisis in his life, and he starts seeing everyone as having his face or the same face and the same voice. And he's lonely and just feels disconnected from everything. And then finally he meets a woman who has her own distinct face and voice. And it's like this chance of like human connection. And it's such a trippy, odd movie, but it's also great and like poignant and like touching and like has some very memorable scenes. And it's really well crafted. And it's just, I mean, it could have been a huge failure, but it worked and it was cool, and I'm glad it exists.
Team America World Police is the superior puppet movie.
Such a different movie.
Yeah, for sure. Very, very, very different puppet movie. Also, one of the first movies that I remember hearing was funded on, or partially funded on Kickstarter.
Oh.
Anomalisa, which isn't really a thing anymore. But remember at one time, they were like, "We're gonna all fund movies on Kickstarter from now on," and then
Yeah, I do remember that.
didn't really happen. My number 3, and I feel like we've talked about this movie a lot lately, but maybe just me, Prometheus.
Yep.
Which I think is a pretty big swing. You got a filmmaker revisiting an old franchise of his, kind of taking the reins back and deciding that he doesn't want to make the same kind of movie he made with it before. He wants to make more of a hard sci-fi movie than a isolation horror movie. And not everybody liked that change, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the big swing of it. And I like alien movies that barely have aliens in them. My number 3, Prometheus.
I mean, in Prometheus, aren't the humans the aliens?
Aren't we all?
Aren't we all once we
Aliens.
leave the Earth? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I waffled on putting number 3 on my list or not, but I think when you actually think about it, this movie was a pretty big swing that really hit. And this is, well, this is called the Lord of the Rings trilogy. First one came out in 2001. Right. Upon retrospect, people are like, well, that's just like, how is this a big swing? Like, this movie is super successful. It kind of gave us the framework for a lot of movies moving forward and how we're going to tell trilogies, how we're going to tell stories. But just take yourself back to like before this movie came out. And you've got this director named Peter Jackson, who had most people heard of Peter Jackson before this movie. He obviously had made movies before this, but right. Not a household name. He wanted to adapt the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which are 3 books, which are notoriously hard to adapt. There was an attempt to adapt them in the 70s in an animated rotoscope form. That was a failure. No one had really touched the property since. And he wanted to shoot all 3 of the movies at the same time, back to back. And somehow he convinced, I guess, Miramax that this was a good idea. And you can only imagine that Miramax is like, we are taking a huge risk on this movie. And it worked. It's a big swing, and he hit it out of the park.
I agree. I mean, I wouldn't
have considered it, but
there was no proven track record that was definitely going to work. Nor did Peter Jackson have a record of directing movies on that budget, on that scale, and having them be financially successful. So I agree.
And did they make all 3 at the same time, or just the second 2?
All 3 at the same time. They shot them back to back. Yep.
Yeah, that's incredible that they decided to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, my number 2 is There Will Be Blood from 2007, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, and starring Daniel Day-Lewis. And I picked this one for a few reasons. One, I think it's a great movie. 2, the first 20 minutes, there's absolutely no dialogue. We're following Daniel Plainview, and there's no talking whatsoever, and that is quite the way to start a movie.
Isn't he a child at the beginning too?
My memory is he's just kind of digging in a mine for
20 minutes.
Yeah.
I thought the movie started with him as a child with his father, and then it gave us Daniel Day-Lewis as a time jump.
It's possible. There is a significant, it's kind of like WALL-E in the sense of it starts without any talking.
Right. And I know you're talking about it. He's just digging in a pit.
Yeah.
It's like an ant farm shot or something like that.
Sure.
Yep. I know you're talking about.
Maybe we start with him as a kid. That'd be a good way to start it, actually. And
you should PTA some notes on that.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of bold choices in this movie, right? Starting with Daniel Day-Lewis, right? I mean, he makes, even with his voice alone, he makes a very bold choice. And then isn't the soundtrack by Radiohead?
Johnny Green.
One of the guys from Radiohead, yes.
Yeah, Green something, not Greenspan. Greenwood, thank you.
Yes. For a movie set in the 20s, and it's about, or whenever it was set, I don't know. A lot of bold choices. The way it ends is a bold choice, And I just think that this movie at every turn makes the right decision, even though they're not always safe decisions. And I thought it was great. So There Will Be Blood is my number 2.
I think I've maybe only seen that once. I need to rewatch.
Okay.
I need to rewatch like his entire filmography. I recently rewatched The Master. That was my second viewing on that too. And I was like, this is great. I need to watch more PTA for sure.
Very cool.
I've seen it twice and I liked it so much more on the second viewing.
Yeah. It's been long enough for me
Yeah.
now that like I think of the bulk of it would feel brand new to me.
That's really how it felt like I was watching for the first time. It's really,
I need to rewatch the Frog movie.
Magnolia.
Oh, Magnolia. And?
Yeah. Because it came up, a YouTube video came up of Kevin Smith talking trash about Magnolia. But this was like circa like the late 90s. He had released Dogma and Magnolia was getting all the critical praise, and he thought Dogma was like going to be like the movie that everybody loved from him. And they, the same people that like his other movies like Dogma. But he didn't get like any bigger exposure from it or anything like that. He like didn't grow his fan base with Dogma or anything like that. But then this video starts with him talking trash about Magnolia, and then fast forwards to him like circa 2018, where he's like, and then I actually watched Magnolia and I understood why everybody loves that movie. He's like, I hadn't even seen it at the time.
Oh, that's really funny.
Right. All right. My number 2, speaking of Kevin Smith, is Southland Tales.
Oh.
Which has Kevin Smith in it. He shows up in this movie in like the last 20 minutes playing a legless Iraq war veteran of all things. Which might
you do.
Right. Might clue you into what you can expect from this movie. If you've never seen Southland Tales, it's set in the mid-aughts. It was released in 2006-ish, 2005, 2006. Stars a fresh-faced Dwayne Johnson. This is pre-action star Dwayne Johnson. I think he had been in maybe a Mummy movie and maybe Scorpion King at this point, but not any of his big action movies. You've also got mid-aughts staples like Sean William Scott and Sarah Michelle Gellar, Justin Timberlake, Mandy Moore, Bai Ling, Wallace Shawn from that one movie, Princess Bride.
Right. Also the Grand Negus on DS9, for those of you who have watched.
Yep. I haven't seen that show other than a couple episodes of the first season, but yes, he's in that as well. This is a wacky movie, I would say. It's like, it's as if Richard Kelly, the director, who previously made Donnie Darko, just kind of cashed in all his chips on this one, whether he should have or not. He got everybody that he wanted to be in it. He basically, what do you call it when you like cast somebody because they're not right for the role?
Like a stunt cast?
No, cast would be like
counter casting,
maybe something like that. It's as if he counter casted the entire movie. Like every role, he was like, who would you not expect to play this character? That's who I'm going to go get. And it's definitely steeped in the politics of the time and his perspective on the Iraq War and the United States invading other countries for oil, and his opinion on all of those things. His hatred of George W. Bush is apparent while you watch this movie. And just, I would say a pretty young director trying to have something to say on these things in his own special, interesting, big swing kind of way. And at the end of it, it's very messy. It's certainly not a perfect movie, but an interesting oddity from the time, from a director who was pretty much on his way and kind of killed his career in one fell swoop with this one movie. Like he really did not recover after the failure of this movie, both critically and financially, which is a shame because I think Richard Kelly's an interesting guy. And despite the fact that this movie has some pretty glaring flaws that even I would admit. I do think it's an interesting piece of art. And that's why I will always stump for Southland Tales, my number 2.
Zach called it earlier in the podcast.
Oh yeah,
He knew it had to be
I
on
knew
this
it.
list.
You knew. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. My number 2 is 2015's Mad Max: Fury Road, directed by George Miller. And George Miller famously made the Mad Max series, but had not touched the series since 1985 when he made Beyond Thunderdome.
Mhm.
After that, I think he made Babe Pig in the City and a couple Happy Feet movies. So between Beyond Thunderdome and Mad Max Fury Road, in like 30 years, he had made like 4 movies, and they're mostly dealing with animals or animated. Somehow he convinced Warner Brothers, like, hey, I want to revisit this franchise. We're going to kind of reboot the whole thing. We're going to go out to Namibia. We're going to film it. We don't need CGI. We'll just blow up a bunch of cars. This movie had I think a challenging production is the easiest way to describe it. A lot of strife between Charlize Theron, always the professional, and Tom Hardy, who seemed like he was acting like a big diva at the moment, being where he was in his career. But somehow they even fought over, should this movie be like super drab or super bright? Right? Everything about this movie was fought over. Yet somehow we were delivered Mad Max Fury Road. Maybe not a commercial success. It made its money, right? But it didn't make gangbusters bucks. But definitely a critical success, an action success, and many people's like favorite movie of the last 10, 15 years. So big swing, big hit.
Fury Road
Nice.
didn't make its money.
No, it made its money, but like I don't think it made a ton of money. I don't think it made as much as you think it did.
I mean, it's not.
I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Not a top. Okay, it budget 154 to 185.
Okay,
It's quite a range.
that's quite a range. Yeah.
Box office 380.
Yeah, I mean, so that again, it doubled. But if you imagine, okay, hold on. If you imagine that like the production is 150 plus they need another 150 for marketing, right? That's kind of the formula.
Mm-hmm.
So it needed to make 300 to break even. How much did it make?
380.
380. So that's not a huge hit. It broke even and made a little bit of money on top.
Fair enough.
Right? It didn't even make half a B.
It never was going to, though. I mean, Mad Max movies are not like those kinds of movies.
Right. No, but I mean, what I'm saying is, like, I think people, if you ask people how much money did this make, they probably think it made half a B, if not more than that.
Maybe.
So that's not like
It's clearly a flop. I agree.
Yeah, definitely a flop, but it holds a dear place in my heart.
Sure.
Zach, what's your number 1?
My number 1 has been mentioned already, and it is Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet.
All right.
Yeah, it's a movie I definitely love. I just love this movie. It's so, yeah, I don't know why I love it so much, but I love that it's like pretty much straight Shakespeare's dialogue from Romeo and Juliet with not just a modern rapper. There's like a bunch of things going on. It's its own little world, right? It's not like just the real world. It's this heightened reality where everyone kind of shares this like fantasy space, where like people have these, it's all shot in Rio and people have these stylized guns and these like white gangs, and it's just odd,
Like graffiti everywhere.
Yeah, it's just such a very specific visual look, and then match that with like the editing of the film, right, is super hyper specific to that film, and with the like the old dialogue, it's just such a great like amalgam of things, and so I love it. I think it's fantastic, but like even the boldness of calling it William Shakespeare's Romeo plus Juliet, instead of just Romeo and Juliet, it's audacious and it works so well for me, and I really love it. So Romeo plus Juliet.
I mean, didn't he do that just to differentiate it from previous filmed versions?
So I mean, you could talk about a lot of reasons why he did it. I think the primary reason he did it is he's like, look, other Romeo and Juliets, you know, are like, I want you to know that this is not just a modern adaptation and expect people to talk like they do modernly.
Mm-hmm.
Like this will be Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, just presented in a modern wrapper.
Gotcha.
He does want you to think you're walking into West Side Story.
Yeah. I mean, the plus instead of the and, I think, differentiates it somewhat already. So
that's the Baz Luhrmann touch right there.
Do you think there was like a bigger reason why he did that?
The plus?
Yeah. Or was it just to be Baz Luhrmann and change it a little bit?
I think it's to be Baz Luhrmann because there's other movies called Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
So like Zach said, to differentiate it from the other ones.
Yeah. So no bigger reason other than that, in your opinion?
Do you need more reasons than that?
I don't know. It's an interesting choice.
Because he wanted to show the connection between the two, because Romeo plus Juliet equals, and then you must fill it in yourself. It's up to you to decide.
I think just to show that like there's modern elements to this movie too.
Okay. My number one biggest swing movie is a movie that I don't necessarily love, but I think it's interesting how it played out. I'm talking Star Wars: Episode 1 M-, The Phantom Menace.
All right.
I feel like this movie could have been a very different movie that would have been accepted, and then maybe people would have moved on from it fairly quickly. Like if Lucas had just made a sequel to Return of the Jedi and reused the ship designs from the original trilogy and got all the old actors back together again, all the faces and the Chewbacca of it all and all that kind of stuff, and just continued the story that everybody already loved, that would have been boring, right? That's not a big swing. That's a guaranteed thing. Instead, he's like, no, we're going back. We're telling the original story. Oh, and I'm going to make it look nothing like the movies that you love. I'm going to change it all. I'm going to make all the ships clean as a whistle. In fact, it reflects everything. There isn't a spot of grime on anything. And turn this thing into a political costume drama. Suck all the joy and adventure out of it as much as possible. And also, I'm going to make a fully digital character for the first time from one side or the other. Motion captured, fully digital, 100%. And instead of making it human, I'm going to make it the most annoying alien you can imagine and have it speak some version of Jamaican or so, whatever he was, whatever Jar Jar was speaking in that movie.
We can call it maybe offensive.
Sure. And I'm going to take what people love about the series, the Force, and I'm going to try to describe it in scientific terms, even though nobody wants that. But I'm going to do that. I'm going to shove that into the movie as well. And yeah, it just felt like one big swing after another, all completely unnecessary, but he just wanted to do it. And so he did it. And I'm not sure it like turned out the best, at least for my money. It wasn't necessarily the best of big swings, but I can't deny that the guy did what he wanted to do. And he took a bunch of big swings when he really did not have to with The Phantom Menace. And some of the things that remind me of the original movies were very successful, like the what's his name, the main Sith guy from this,
Darth Maul.
Darth Maul was great, even though pretty thin character for sure, but Darth Maul was at least interesting to watch. The lightsaber battles were interesting. That's about the beginning and end of it as far as I'm concerned. But I respect the movie even if I don't necessarily like it, and I respect it because it was clear that Lucas was trying new things, for better or for worse, and doing it on a level that it was pretty risky. On some level. I mean, I don't know. He probably could have done nothing and it would have been just as successful. And he was going to get to make the next movies no matter what. It was pretty much set up for that. But anyway, my number one, probably the biggest swing of all, and the most expensive, before Megalopolis, the most expensive independent movie ever made.
Oh, self-funded.
Yep. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Megalopolis took that record from it.
Nice.
James, you did suggest a list of doing like number or top 10 self-funded movies. I think that would be a fun list to do sometime.
That was Zach, but I'm down with it too.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever. It's on Discord. One of you guys suggested it. All right. My number one movie, my number one biggest swing is also my favorite movie of 2022. And this is Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. This movie is directed by Daniel Scheinert and Daniel Kwan, also just known as the Daniels. The movie they did before this, I believe, is Swiss Army Man, which is best known as the Farting Corpse movie starring Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe, which is a pretty weird movie on its own, but also a pretty dark movie. James, I know you've seen it.
Yeah.
But Zach, you still have not seen it.
No.
It's weird, and then it goes dark places also, just for people just to know on that one. So I think anyone was expecting their next movie to also just be another weird, dark foray. And Everything Everywhere All at Once is definitely a weird movie, but it works. You would think this movie would not work because you're looking at Michelle Yeoh, who's a great actress, but definitely at this point, her career, she was playing like a lot of matronly roles. And in this movie, she starts off playing a matronly role. And then you have Ki-Hai Kwan, like Short Rounds and Data from Goonies, who hasn't done anything in 30 years. And he was brought back into this so much that people didn't even know it was him at first. And this movie starts pretty standard as like an immigrant story about this immigrant couple. They're fighting with each other. They're fighting with their daughter. Their business is failing. They're fighting with the IRS, and everything just seems to be not going their way whatsoever. And then this movie just blows up into this multi-dimensional story about different paths your lives could take, imbuing martial arts into it, tapping into Michelle Yeoh's talents, tapping into Ki-Hai Kwan's talents. I had no idea that he was a stunt coordinator before I saw this movie. This movie gives you emotional depth about the relationship between the mother and the daughter and how that's portrayed on screen in both beautiful and absurd ways. This whole movie is absurdity on screen. And this movie somehow makes it all work. It makes it all work so much that this movie won Best Picture. So it doesn't just work for like a niche group of people. This movie has, I was thinking, at least general critical acceptance. And I remember the first time I saw this movie felt special to me. And then I saw it again. I'm like, yeah, this movie is definitely a special movie. And it's a great big swing. And it's such a success. Like if we're talking successes here, this movie had a budget of like 14 to 20 million and made 150 million. So that's 10 times its money. Fury Road wishes it could make 10 times its money.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Great pick.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's my number one. That's it. Unless you got any more, James, you want to add on?
I don't have any more.
Okay. That cement dust is really working into its brain, isn't it?
It really is.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode 651 of the Cinereelists. It was fun talking to you guys about big swing movies. If you have a movie in mind that we have not mentioned that was definitely a big swing movie, you should send it to us via email, heyguys@cinereelists.com. You could also send a comment, a question, a list suggestion, any of those kinds of things as well. We'll discuss it on a future episode of the podcast. While you're at it, you could check out the video version of this podcast on YouTube. Search Cinereelists there. Watch while you listen. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Cinereelists, or leave us an Apple Podcast review. You could also follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at Cinereelists, or you can follow me on my personal Twitter, Blue Sky, or Letterboxd at YoJRB.
You can follow me at Shaubin on Twitter or Letterboxd.
You can find me on Letterboxd at Peter SKB.
Next week, we will definitely be watching The Wild Robot and discussing that. And we'll probably throw another movie on here as well. Probably not Joker 2, but maybe we'll get to that at some point in the future. We'll see.
Could you give us the full title, please?
Joker Folly da
Folly
Folly Ado. Folly Ado. What does that even mean? Ado means goodbye,
no, it's a
right?
game of two.
That's what Folly Ado means. Game of
Yeah, it's
two?
like two. It takes two to tango. A game of two. Yeah.
So it's do, not adieu.
Yeah. Folly is like a game, and then is the, and then two. So it's a game of two.
Game the two.
A game of two
Okay.
is the direct translation, but the meaning is sort of like it takes two to tango kind of sense.
Gotcha. The best titles are the ones you have to describe. Exactly. what
It's
it means.
maybe the most pretentious title I've heard in this century, besides Megalopolis.
Sure. So look forward to that. We'll see you guys there. Until then, keep it cinereal.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.